Tigr Vormud Vorn, a young archer from a small territory, finds his life completely changed after crossing paths with a legendary female war leader who chooses to spare him on the battlefield. As conflicts between kingdoms continue to escalate, he becomes entangled with several powerful and influential women, each carrying ambitions, secrets, and feelings that could alter the course of his destiny. While struggling to protect his homeland, one question remains: can Tigr Vormud survive the political intrigue and emotional turmoil surrounding him, or will it all drag him into an even greater war? One day, Eleonora asked Tigr Vormud to surrender to her, and from that moment on, she considered Tigr Vormud to be under her command. After the war between the Kingdom of Brunn and the Kingdom of Jtid, Tigr Vormud of Brunn lost many of his comrades. He reflected on how harsh and unforgiving the battle had been. During the conflict, he witnessed the War Maiden skillfully defeating her opponents one after another. At that time, Tigr Vormud only had 5 arrows left. Before long, a soldier from Jtid rushed toward him. Reacting quickly, Tigr Vormud released an arrow, and the soldier immediately fell. Unfortunately, the soldier's horse ran off at full speed, even though Tigr Vormud had hoped to take it for himself. Soon after, Tigr Vormud spotted 7 soldiers from Jtid. Among them was Eleonora, the renowned war maiden. Since he had only a few arrows remaining, he decided to target the leader. He believed that if their commander were in danger, the others would focus on protecting her rather than pursuing him. Tigr Vormud carefully moved into position. The distance between him and the Jtid soldiers was about 300 alsons, and he was confident that his attack would hit its mark. Without hesitation, he fired 2 arrows, both of which struck Eleonora's guards. The moment she saw this, Eleonora drew her sword and fixed her gaze on Tigr Vormud. She urged her horse forward and charged toward him. Tigr Vormud fired another arrow in her direction, but Eleonora easily deflected it with the sword in her hand. After closing the distance, she ordered Tigr Vormud to surrender. In the region of Dynet, a fierce war was taking place between the Kingdom of Brunn and the Kingdom of Jtid. From their position, the Brunn forces appeared incredibly powerful and numerous. Not a single Brunn soldier believed that defeat was even possible. The night before, Tigr Vormud had been enjoying a conversation with several soldiers when Xian suddenly approached him. Xian was surprised to see that Tigr Vormud would be participating in the war as well. Although Xian clearly looked down on him, Tigr Vormud greeted him politely. He explained that his presence on the battlefield was also the result of His Majesty's decision. Xian wondered what Tigr Vormud could possibly contribute to the war effort. He even mocked Tigr Vormud's appearance, pointing out his worn clothing and the fact that he was not wearing standard military armor. Xian then reached toward Tigr Vormud's bow, but Tigr Vormud swiftly pulled it away, causing Xian to lose his balance and stumble. Tigr Vormud could not tolerate the possibility of his bow being damaged. Xian claimed that only cowards relied on bows. He was convinced that Tigr Vormud chose a bow because he could not properly use a sword or a spear. Xian also dismissed Tigr Vormud's commitment to the war, especially since his companion was merely an elderly man who, in Xian's opinion, might not be able to endure much longer. The elderly man, Bertrand, became irritated by the remarks, but Tigr Vormud tried to calm him down. Xian continued by insisting that the nobles of Brunn should undergo rigorous training every day. Suddenly, Mashaz appeared, catching Xian completely off guard. Mashaz commented that Xian's speech had been remarkably passionate and must have left him thirsty, so he suggested that Xian enjoy a glass of wine. Afterward, Tigr Vormud thanked Mashaz. He realized that Xian's comments had gone too far and had nearly provoked him. Fortunately, Mashaz had stepped in and diffused the situation. At that moment, they overheard several people discussing Lord Maximilian Venusa. According to the rumors, Maximilian had been taking advantage of the war to increase taxes while living comfortably in his castle. The conversation then shifted to Lord Thénardier. People claimed that Thénardier was seeking divine assistance to protect his territory and had even offered up all of his wine as part of his efforts. In the eyes of the people, neither noble showed much compassion toward those who disobeyed them. They also spoke about stories claiming that Thénardier demanded absolute loyalty from everyone in his household and imposed severe punishments on those who refused to comply. Hearing all of this left Tigr Vormud deeply unsettled. Mashaz told Tigr Vormud that many of those stories were indeed true, although Tigr Vormud found them difficult to believe. Mashaz guessed that Tigr Vormud was unaware of these matters because he rarely left his own territory. Mashaz believed that His Majesty was surely searching for a solution. He also felt confident that even if the king could not resolve the situation, Prince Regnaz would eventually find a way. Suddenly, Mashaz shoved a finger into Tigr Vormud's mouth. It turned out that everything that had just happened was part of a dream. In reality, Limelisha had placed the tip of her sword against Tigr Vormud's mouth in order to wake him up. Tigr Vormud remarked that Limelisha had a unique way of waking someone up. Eleonora admitted that it was the first time she had ever done something like that for another person. She had not expected Tigr Vormud to be so noisy while sleeping. Tigr Vormud jokingly considered it one of his special talents. He then realized that he was currently in the Kingdom of Jtid. Lime Elisha informed him that Eleonora wanted to see him. Meanwhile, Mashaz and Bertrand informed Tita that Tigr Vormund had been captured. Mashaz explained that their forces had been scattered by the enemy's guerrilla attacks, leaving Tigr Vormund with no opportunity to escape. As a result, he had become a prisoner of Jictid. Tita was confused about how they could have lost when the Kingdom of Brun's army had outnumbered the enemy 5-1. Their army had consisted of roughly 25,000 soldiers, while the enemy force had only around 5,000 troops. Since it had been Prince Regnaz's first campaign, His Majesty had deployed nearly every available soldier in the kingdom. That was how Tigr Vormund had become involved in the war, despite having originally been assigned only 100 soldiers. The enemy commander had announced that if a ransom was not paid to Jictid within 50 days, Tigr Vormund would officially become their property. Tita immediately asked how much the ransom was. Although it would be difficult, she believed that gathering resources from all the villages might be enough. However, Mashaz revealed that Jictid was demanding an amount equal to 3 times the annual income of Alsace, or something of equivalent value. At the same time, Tigr Vormund was trying to persuade Eleonora to lower the ransom amount. Eleonora refused to budge. If the demand was not met, Tigr Vormund would automatically become her possession. Tigr Vormund wondered if she had really ordered someone to place a sword blade in front of him just so she could continue teasing him. As it turned out, Eleonora also had a request for him. She wanted him to demonstrate his archery skills. However, every arrow Tigr Vormund fired missed the target. Rurik and the others laughed at him, wondering why Eleonora would bother keeping someone like him as a prisoner. Just as he prepared to shoot another arrow, Tigr Vormund spotted someone above them aiming at Eleonora. He immediately warned her. Eleonora used her power to deflect the incoming arrow and then ordered her subordinates to pursue the attacker. Tigr Vormund asked whether they intended to capture the culprit alive, prompting Lime Elisha to scold him for worrying about the attacker. Without hesitation, Tigr Vormund fired an arrow that struck the person's leg. Everyone was stunned. Even with a poor quality bow, he had accurately hit the target from a distance of nearly 300 alsons. Witnessing this, Eleonora openly acknowledged Tigr Vormund's incredible archery skills. The following day, Eleonora apologized to Tigr Vormund. The bow he had used the previous day was far from ideal. Tigr Vormund admitted that he had already suspected as much, although he had initially assumed it was the standard equipment used in Jictid. 3 individuals had been responsible for the incident, and Eleonora intended to have them severely punished. Tigr Vormund was surprised by how seriously she was taking the matter. In Eleonora's view, those individuals had publicly insulted his abilities and damaged his reputation. Tigr Vormund pleaded for leniency and hoped she would forgive them. Curious about her actions, Tigr Vormund asked why she was going to such lengths on his behalf. Lime Elisha explained that Eleonora had developed a strong admiration for him from the moment they met on the battlefield. The revelation surprised Tigr Vormund. Eleonora described it as a bond born on the battlefield, one formed between 2 people who had once stood on opposing sides. She clarified that what impressed her was Tigr Vormund's extraordinary talent as an archer. Rumors had previously spread that her feelings were romantic in nature, and some even claimed she had considered eliminating Tigr Vormund to protect her reputation. To settle the rumors, Eleonora had decided to display his skills before everyone. However, Tigr Vormund's abilities had exceeded even her expectations. She also revealed that the reason she had kept him as a prisoner was not because of the ransom money. Instead, she believed that having him around would make life far more interesting. To her, war was often unpleasant and painfully boring. Eleonora commanded only 5,000 soldiers, while the Kingdom of Brun had 5 times that number. She had expected a difficult and exhausting battle. Instead, the conflict ended in less than half a day. Despite preparing numerous strategies, Brun's army collapsed under her very first tactic: guerrilla warfare. Although Brun's forces initially resisted Jictid's assault, the Jictid army eventually broke through their defenses, pushed deep into their ranks, and succeeded in defeating Prince Regnaz. Tigr Vormund could hardly believe that Prince Regnaz had fallen so quickly. He admitted that he had met the prince personally in the past. Eleonora then wondered whether Tigr Vormund harbored any resentment toward her because of what had happened. From Tigr Vormund's perspective, such outcomes were an unfortunate but natural part of war. Eleonora explained that once the prince had fallen, Brun's forces lost their unity and became disorganized. Jictid's army then pursued the retreating soldiers, turning the remainder of the conflict into a completely one-sided battle. She found the outcome deeply disappointing because the war had ended far more easily than she had anticipated. It was during that battle that Eleonora encountered Tigr Vormund. At that moment, she felt that eliminating someone with such remarkable talent would have been a tremendous waste. Tigr Vormund's face turned red as Eleonora approached him. Eleonora admired the fact that Tigr Vormund had never given up and had even intended to defeat her. That was why she had taken him as a prisoner. Noticing Lime Elisha's displeased expression, Eleonora asked whether she was still upset about what had happened. It turned out that Lim had been the cavalry rider whom Tigr Vormund had managed to defeat. Lime Elisha then introduced herself to Tigr Vormund. Eleonora asked whether Tigr Vormud's name had a special origin, as it was unusually long for someone from Brünn. Tigr Vormud explained that the name had been given to him by his late family, although he was usually called Tigr. Upon hearing that, Eleonora asked Tigr Vormud to call her Ilen instead. However, Lima Alicia insisted on addressing her properly and using her full name. Eleonora promised that she would treat Tigr Vormud with the same respect given to the nobles of Brünn and that she would not discriminate against him on the battlefield. Tigr Vormud thanked her for the offer, but he declined. He already had a place to return to and a land he was responsible for protecting. Alsace, the territory inherited from his father. That afternoon, Tita continued praying for Tigr Vormud's safety and well-being. Later that day, Tigr Vormud was spending time with Rurik. He wondered why Rurik had shaved his head and looked rather unusual. Rurik explained that Princess Eleonora had ordered him to give up something very precious in exchange for keeping his life. By all rights, he should have already passed away, but Tigr Vormud's kindness had given him another chance to live. Rurik was deeply grateful for that kindness. He also admitted that Tigr Vormud's skill with a bow was extraordinary and that it had left him feeling embarrassed by comparison. The others watched them and openly acknowledged Tigr Vormud's remarkable archery skills. That evening, Rurik accompanied Tigr Vormud during dinner. Tigr Vormud truly enjoyed the meal. According to Rurik, it was an ordinary dish injected. Tigr Vormud thought that when he returned to Alsace, he would ask Tita to prepare something similar. After eating, Tigr Vormud practiced archery with the others, and once again they praised his abilities. He found it surprising how naturally he had blended in with the people around him. As he walked through the castle grounds, he passed by an area where several young men were bathing. They glanced at him with unfriendly expressions. Tigr Vormud continued exploring the castle until he suddenly came across a small dragon. It was the first time he had ever seen one. The little dragon turned out to be Eleonora's pet. She explained that its name was Luni. Realizing that he had accidentally entered a private area while Eleonora was bathing, Tigr Vormud immediately turned away and apologized. He explained that he had simply stumbled upon the place while taking a walk around the castle. Eleonora told him there was no need to apologize and instead suggested that he clean himself up as well. Tigr Vormud wondered whether there were fewer social boundaries between men and women in Gstaad. Eleonora smiled and explained that she was a war maiden. Even if she were ever caught off guard in an awkward situation and felt embarrassed, she could not allow herself to be overwhelmed by the circumstances. She had to remain composed and face any challenge that came her way. She then repeated that she wanted Tigr Vormud to remain by her side. That night, as Tigr Vormud prepared to sleep, he found the place surprisingly comfortable. His face flushed when he remembered Eleonora. Suddenly, Rurik knocked on his door and informed him that a man from Brünn had been captured. The man turned out to be Bertrand. When Bertrand saw Tigr Vormud approaching, he felt immense relief and gratitude that Tigr Vormud was still alive and safe. Tigr Vormud quickly informed Rurik and the others that Bertrand was an old friend. Bertrand then delivered urgent news. The nobles serving Thénardier were advancing toward Alsace with an army of 3,000 soldiers. Upon hearing this, Tigr Vormud immediately prepared to leave. However, as he approached the gate that night, Eleonora stepped in front of him and stopped his departure. She asked where he was planning to go at such a late hour. Zion's father, Felix Aaron, ordered Zion to take command of 3,000 soldiers and head to Alsace. Zion questioned why he had to go through the trouble of traveling to Tigr Vormud's territory, which had suddenly fallen into enemy hands. Felix Aaron explained that he would provide a group of well-trained dragons. If Zion brought those dragons onto the battlefield, it would certainly create a remarkable display. Zion was completely confident that he could devastate the land that Tigr Vormud cared about so deeply. Meanwhile, Eleonora stopped Tigr Vormud as he was about to leave and asked where he was going so late at night. Tigr Vormud told Eleonora to step aside immediately. At that moment, Bertrand happened to meet Eleonora, who was known as the War Maiden. Tigr Vormud was impressed by Eleonora's appearance and Eleonora noticed his reaction. She remarked that she had chosen that outfit intentionally, hoping it would catch his attention. Hearing that, Tigr Vormud's face turned red as he recalled an embarrassing memory involving Eleonora. Tigr Vormud explained that he had to return to Alsace because the nobleman Thénardier was sending his forces there. He could not stand by and wait for Alsace to be consumed by war. He even vowed that he would return to Gstaad after making sure Alsace was safe once again. Eleonora asked what Tigr Vormud intended to do once he arrived in Alsace. Tigr Vormud answered that he would protect the people of Alsace. Eleonora acknowledged his extraordinary skill with a bow, but she believed there was little else he could accomplish on his own. Although Tigr Vormud was talented, she was not convinced that he could stand against an army of 3,000 soldiers. In her eyes, his plan was foolish. Tigr Vormud understood her point, yet he remained convinced that there had to be something he could do. Eleonora criticized him for not thinking things through carefully. Drawing her sword, she declared that if he insisted on leaving, she would carry out his execution. She stated that if Tigr of Wormwood truly wished to throw away his life, it would make no difference whether he fell in Alsace or in Leitmeritz by her hand. Tigr of Wormwood realized that Eleonora had no intention of letting him go. Eleonora was frustrated because Tigr of Wormwood was not using his intelligence. She reminded him that even during desperate circumstances in the Dinant Plains, he had managed to influence the course of events and create an opportunity for victory. She could not understand why he was not relying on that same cleverness now. In her opinion, he was allowing his emotions to control him. Tigr of Wormwood could not find the right words to explain himself. He also wondered why Eleonora had not simply restrained him. It would have been easy for her to order Rurik to arrest him. He began to suspect that perhaps Eleonora was offering him another option. Tigr of Wormwood then pleaded with Eleonora to lend him troops. Everyone around them was shocked to hear such a request. Lai Militia thought that Tigr of Wormwood was an ungrateful prisoner. Unexpectedly, Eleonora burst into laughter, leaving Tigr of Wormwood completely confused. She remarked that he truly knew how to surprise her. Eleonora admitted that she could lend him her army, but she certainly would not do so for free. She demanded all of Alsace as payment. Tigr of Wormwood agreed, provided that Eleonora could guarantee fair governance and ensure the safety of all its citizens. Without hesitation, Eleonora immediately ordered her forces to assist Alsace. Lai Militia was genuinely astonished by how confidently Eleonora made that decision. That very night, Eleonora and her army set out for Alsace. Earlier, Lai Militia had never imagined that Tigr of Wormwood would make such an impossible request. Eleonora commented that Tigr of Wormwood had shattered both of their expectations. Lai Militia admitted that she had thought Tigr of Wormwood would challenge Eleonora to an archery contest. Eleonora, on the other hand, had expected him to beg to become her subordinate. According to Lai Militia, considering the circumstances, both of them had lost their wager. Eleonora disagreed, saying that there was no such thing as a wager where both sides lost. Not long afterward, Tigr of Wormwood approached them. Eleonora asked whether he truly intended to continue wearing those clothes, especially when his position was now not much different from that of a military commander. Tigr of Wormwood replied that those were the only clothes he had. Suddenly, Lai Militia began fixing Tigr of Wormwood's hair, and Eleonora became interested enough to join in. When they finished, Tigr of Wormwood looked at Eleonora. She immediately asked whether he was captivated by her appearance and whether he had any compliments to offer. Tigr of Wormwood admitted that he had felt that way ever since they first met on the Dinant Plains. While they were on the way, Eleonora asked whether Tigr of Wormwood was truly confident they could win, considering their force numbered only 1,000 soldiers while the enemy had 3,000. Tigr of Wormwood remained confident because the enemy did not understand the Alsace region. None of Thénardier's people had visited Alsace recently, while he knew the area extremely well. Hearing that, Eleonora felt reassured, and both of them continued toward Alsace with renewed determination. The following morning, the forces sent by Lord Thénardier arrived in Alsace. Zion instructed his soldiers not to rush forward so that the residents could clearly see how impressive their army looked. He called out to the people, urging them to carefully consider whether they would stand with Thénardier or Ganelon. That was precisely why Felix Aaron had sent Zion to Alsace. In his view, with Prince Regnaz gone, no one remained capable of taking the throne. As a result, Brune now had only two possible leaders, Thénardier or Ganelon. Because of that, Felix Aaron believed he needed to act quickly. Alsace was considered strategically important. Even though it was located far from the capital, there was a strong possibility that Ganelon would attempt to seize it. One of Thénardier's nobles questioned whether Felix Aaron was certain about deploying 3,000 soldiers to such a small territory, especially since he had also sent 2 dragons. Felix Aaron replied that it was precisely because Alsace was a weak territory that they could not afford any hesitation. Furthermore, he wanted Zion to gain experience controlling the dragons. Meanwhile, Tita helped evacuate the residents to the mountains, forests, and temples where they could safely take shelter. Earlier, she had discussed the situation with Mashas and Bertrand. Mashas planned to negotiate with Ganelon, while Bertrand was asked to travel to Jicted because Tigr of Wormwood needed to learn about the situation as quickly as possible. Bertrand promised that he would bring Tigr of Wormwood back. Mashas asked Tita to assist the soldiers in guiding the residents to safe locations in the mountains, forests, and temples. He believed Thénardier would not dare raise a war banner against people seeking refuge in places of worship. Tita chose to remain in the main residence because she wanted to welcome Tigr of Wormwood when he returned home. As she waited there, memories from the past came back to her. On the morning before Tigr of Wormwood departed for the battle at Dinant Plain, he ate the breakfast Tita had prepared. While looking at the many boughs around him, he remarked that they seemed surprisingly troublesome. Tita reminded him not to speak that way because those boughs had belonged to his parents. Tigr of Wormwood admitted that was exactly why he continued to honor their memory. It had already been 2 years since his father's passing. Tigr of Wormwood confessed that he still did not feel worthy of being a lord, but he was grateful to have Bertrand, Tita, and many others supporting him. Tita found it strange that he was talking that way so early in the morning because he normally did not act like that. She asked him to behave as he usually did. At the same time, Bertrand informed the others that Tigre Vormund would soon come down and join the campaign. However, they jokingly assumed that Tita was probably still waking him up. Tita felt deeply worried about Tigre Vormund going to war, but he had no choice. The order had come directly from the king and applied to everyone in Brune. As the head of his territory, Tigre Vormund could not refuse. He reassured Tita not to worry. The Brune army was enormous, and the group from Alsace would mainly serve in a supporting role. Tigre Vormund confidently promised that he would return soon. After gently wiping the tears from Tita's cheeks, he departed. Tita could never forget that final memory before Tigre Vormund became a prisoner of the enemy. Even now, she continued waiting for him, firmly believing that he would eventually come home. Suddenly, Tita heard the soldiers of Thénardier damaging the residents' homes. In addition to causing destruction throughout the area, the troops were also looting property. Zion simply sat at a distance and watched the situation unfold. The residents who had taken shelter in the temple were frightened by everything happening around them. Zion had not expected Alsace to be such a small place. In fact, he was beginning to lose interest in launching an attack. He thought it might be interesting to use the dragons against Alsace, but he knew that acting recklessly could cost him dearly. Earlier, he had been warned that the dragons were not accustomed to populated areas. Because of that, he was forbidden from allowing them to enter the town. Zion felt that bringing the dragons along might have been pointless, but Felix Aaron insisted that the creatures served as a powerful warning to the people of Brune, encouraging them to submit to Thénardier's authority. At that moment, Zion was surprised when one of his soldiers reported that the town of Alsace was practically empty. Most of the residents had fled to the mountains and forests, while the rest had gathered inside the temples. Zion certainly had no intention of approaching the temples. If any harm came to those sacred places, Thénardier's forces could end up facing opposition from every temple throughout Brune. Zion became determined to destroy Tigre Vormund's residence. As soon as Tita heard the commotion downstairs, she hurried down, hoping to find the courage to face the situation. When she saw Zion force his way inside, she immediately confronted him and demanded that he leave the house at once. Zion remarked that Tigre Vormund's maid was just as powerless as her master. Tita burst into tears and shouted for Zion to leave the house. She insisted that the city of Alsace belonged to Tigre Vormund, and that someone like Zion had no right to bring trouble to it. Gathering all her courage, Tita tried to drive him away, but Zion approached her and slashed at her clothing with his sword, causing her to fall. As he continued advancing toward her, Tita quickly grabbed a knife from a nearby shelf. Tita attempted to strike Zion with the knife, but he easily deflected it with his sword. He damaged more of her clothing, leaving her feeling cornered and helpless. At that moment, all she could do was hope that Tigre Vormund would come to save her. Zion laughed and mocked the idea of a servant developing such strong feelings of loyalty toward her master. He suggested that Tigre Vormund might already have been sold into slavery since no one had paid a ransom for him. Zion even spoke of selling Tita as well, claiming that if fortune favored her, she might meet Tigre Vormund again under the same circumstances. Tita firmly declared that Tigre Vormund would definitely return. Zion then shoved Tita, causing her to fall again. Just as the situation grew even more threatening, an arrow suddenly struck Zion's palm. Blood flowed from the wound, and Zion screamed in shock and pain. Tigre Vormund called out to Tita and told her to jump down. Overwhelmed with relief at seeing him arrive, Tita leaped from the balcony. At that very moment, enemy soldiers attacked Tigre Vormund's horse. Rurik engaged the enemies, blocking Tigre Vormund's path, while Tigre Vormund jumped from his horse to catch Tita. At the same time, Eleonora used the power of the wind to assist them, allowing Tita to land safely. Confused by everything that had happened, Tigre Vormund asked what was going on. Eleonora commented that he had acted recklessly. She admitted that she had not intended to make either of them indebted to her, but if she had not intervened, both Tigre Vormund and Tita could have been seriously injured. It was then that Tigre Vormund learned that Eleonora's sword possessed the power to control the wind. Eleonora explained that the sword could only be wielded by a war maiden, and that its name was Arafar. As the wind blew around them, she remarked that Arafar seemed to have taken a liking to Tigre Vormund. Tigre Vormund explained that the person who had attacked Tita was Zion, the eldest son of the Thénardier family and the future heir to their house. Zion was also the leader of the invading force. Rurik immediately led the troops forward into battle. Tita cried with joy after seeing Tigre Vormund return safely. Tigre Vormund wondered why she had not evacuated with everyone else. Tita showed him the heirloom bow she had brought with her. He could not understand why she had taken such a risk. Tita explained that she had been entrusted with protecting Tigre Vormund's residence, and because of that responsibility, she could not bring herself to run away. Even though she had been terrified, she never stopped believing that Tigre Vormund would come back. Deeply moved, Tigre Vormund thanked her and embraced the tearful Tita. Watching the two of them together, Eleonora admitted that she felt a little jealous of their close bond. Tita then asked about the people who had arrived with Tigre Vormund. Suddenly, an arrow flew toward her. Tigre Vormund reacted instantly, catching it and firing it back toward the attacker. successfully striking the enemy archer. Everyone present was amazed by Tigr Vormud's incredible skill. The impact left a wound on Tigr Vormud's palm, and Tita tore a piece of fabric from her clothing to use as a bandage. Eleonora asked whether he was still capable of fighting. Tigr Vormud dismissed the injury as a minor concern. Upon hearing that, Eleonora and her troops immediately advanced into battle. Tigr Vormud moved to follow them, only to discover that his bow had been damaged by the earlier exchange of arrows. Tita then handed him the treasured bow of the Vorn family that she had been carrying all this time. The bow was meant to be used only when absolutely necessary. After considering the situation, Tigr Vormud decided that the time had finally come to use it. Meanwhile, Eleonora reminded her soldiers not to allow a single enemy to escape. Bertrand could hardly believe that Tigr Vormud had finally taken up the legendary heirloom bow. The black bow, having endured through the ages, had at last returned to the battlefield alongside Tigr Vormud. Facing an enemy force of 3,000 soldiers with only 1,000 allies at his side, Tigr Vormud prepared for the battle ahead. The battle came to an end. Around 300 of Thénardier's soldiers had been defeated, while most of the enemy troops who escaped pursuit returned to their main base, likely to organize a new strategy. Zion managed to survive the battle. According to Eleonora, if the enemy force numbered 3,000 soldiers, Thénardier's army at that time consisted of approximately 2,700 troops. Lime Elisha explained that 100 of their soldiers had already been assigned to protect the city, leaving only 900 troops available for the battlefield. This meant that Eleonora's forces were still outnumbered by Thénardier's army. Eleonora asked Tigr Vormud how far the enemy forces had retreated. Tigr Vormud estimated that the enemy was likely positioned on the plains of Molsheim, since that location would allow them to maximize their combat effectiveness. Eleonora then decided to move quickly against the enemy forces and make them answer for their actions. Meanwhile, Thénardier's soldiers hurried to report to Zion that Jugdid's forces had launched an attack against them. Hearing this news, Zion was shocked and could not understand how Jugdid's army had become involved in the battle. He became increasingly frustrated and was convinced that Tigr Vormud was responsible for everything. Zion immediately assigned a reconnaissance unit to prevent Jugdid's forces from returning freely and to determine their exact numbers. He remained certain that Tigr Vormud had brought Jugdid's soldiers into Alsace. Filled with anger, Zion viewed Tigr Vormud as a traitor. At the same time, the wound in his hand caused by an arrow continued to trouble him, and he began planning a response for Tigr Vormud. After the defeat, Zion reorganized his 2,700 soldiers into several divisions. The first division consisted of 700 frontline troops equipped with bows and spears. The second division consisted of 1,000 heavily armored knights armed with long lances. The final division contained 1,000 regular Brune soldiers who were highly trained for combat on open terrain. Their forces were also supported by 2 dragons. Elsewhere, Tita asked the women of the town to help connect and prepare ropes for the upcoming battle. The women worked diligently and joined together to support Tigr Vormud, hoping he would be able to drive the enemy forces away from the city of Alsace. From a distance, Lime Elisha watched their efforts. Earlier, the strategy devised by Eleonora and the others was for her and Tigr Vormud to lead 400 soldiers, while Lime Elisha would handle the remaining forces. Eleonora instructed everyone to identify weaknesses in the enemy's tactics and take advantage of them. When Eleonora asked whether Lime Elisha had a plan prepared, Lime Elisha explained that she needed a large amount of rope. Upon hearing this, Tita volunteered to gather it with the help of the city's residents. Tigr Vormud thanked Tita for taking responsibility for the task. At that moment, Tita appeared nervous, but she gathered the courage to ask about the nature of Eleonora's relationship with Tigr Vormud. Eleonora responded with a smile and made it clear that Tigr Vormud belonged under her authority. Tita was stunned by the remark. Tigr Vormud explained that he had indeed been Eleonora's prisoner at the time, but Eleonora emphasized that according to the circumstances surrounding their arrangement, he was still considered hers. Tita then became determined not to give up and quickly left after expressing her resolve. Mashas found Tita's reaction amusing and laughed at her charming behavior. Tigr Vormud later asked what would be done with the horses they had captured from the enemy. Lime Elisha explained that they would be sent to the city of Celesta. Tigr Vormud then proposed another interesting idea, which Lime Elisha admitted was a very promising plan. The soldiers began preparing for battle. Bertrand carried numerous bags filled with arrows that Tigr Vormud would use. He remarked that carrying so much equipment made it difficult for him to wield his sword effectively. Tigr Vormud reassured him that as long as Bertrand remained behind him and Eleonora, they would do everything possible to keep him safe from danger. Eleonora also declared that as long as she remained standing, she would not allow Tigr Vormud to be harmed. To launch a counteroffensive against Thénardier's army, 400 Jugdid soldiers assembled at the front lines. Their commanders were Eleonora and Tigr Vormud. Before long, the two sides were about to face each other in battle. Before it began, Eleonora asked whether Tigr Vormud felt afraid. He did not deny it, but he had no intention of accepting defeat. As soon as the battle started, Eleonora led her troops forward and launched the attack. The Thenardier soldiers fired a volley of arrows, while their spearmen prepared to meet the advancing Jtid forces. Eleonora swung Arifar, creating a powerful gust that deflected the incoming arrows. At the same time, Tigr Vormud released 3 arrows at once toward the enemy archers. Seeing how accurate his attack was, Eleonora praised Tigr Vormud's remarkable skill. Tigr Vormud was surprised to hear such praise from her. Eleonora continued advancing, skillfully cutting through the enemy's spear formations. She moved across the battlefield with incredible speed, overcoming every opponent who stood in her way. Tigr Vormud could not help but admire Eleonora's reputation as the maiden of the battlefield. Watching her fight only strengthened his belief that their army would emerge victorious. Filled with determination, Eleonora and her troops pressed forward against the enemy. During the battle, Bertrand efficiently supplied Tigr Vormud with additional arrows. Just as they succeeded in forcing the enemy lines to retreat, they suddenly found themselves facing an enormous dragon. Eleonora was shocked to discover that the enemy had brought a tamed dragon onto the battlefield. The Thenardier forces cleared a path for the dragon and moved to surround their opponents from both flanks. The Jtid soldiers struggled to avoid the massive creature as it pushed through the battlefield. Those who came too close were easily knocked aside by its overwhelming size. Tigr Vormud quickly fired an arrow toward the dragon's eye, but to his surprise, the creature's defenses were far stronger than expected. Zion laughed as he watched Tigr Vormud's forces become trapped. He was convinced that Tigr Vormud's army would soon be crushed under the dragon's advance. However, before long, reinforcements from Jtid arrived and launched an assault on the left flank of the Thenardier army. These reinforcements were led by Limalisha and Rurik. The 400 soldiers under Limalisha's command separated from the main force and moved independently to weaken the defenses of Thenardier's Knight Corps. In an instant, the enemy's attention was divided, creating an opportunity for Eleonora to step forward and confront the dragon on her own. She had never expected the enemy to deploy a dragon, so she decided to respond by revealing one of her ultimate techniques. Raising her sword, she created a powerful whirlwind known as Lay Admos. Designed specifically to bring down massive targets, the technique unleashed an overwhelming force. As it struck the dragon, the armor covering its body was torn away piece by piece, and the creature was defeated almost instantly. Tigr Vormud could hardly believe what he had just witnessed. Eleonora explained that it was the first time she had shown that technique to him. Because of its tremendous destructive power, she had always been careful about when and where to use it. Not long afterward, additional enemy reinforcements arrived, prompting Limalisha to order a retreat. Zion responded by dispatching 400 soldiers from his main force and forming a new unit. Limalisha led her troops toward a nearby hill. When the Thenardier forces pursued them, she signaled her soldiers to pull a series of ropes that had been prepared in advance. In an instant, many of the pursuing soldiers lost their footing. At that very moment, Limalisha's troops turned around and launched a counterattack. In her view, the Thenardier soldiers had become so focused on chasing their opponents that they failed to pay attention to their surroundings. Looking at the preparations that had been made, Limalisha realized that without the support and goodwill of the local people, gathering so many ropes would have been difficult. She began to understand just how highly respected Tigr Vormud was among his people. As the battle continued, Eleonora informed her forces that the time had come to push the enemy back. Meanwhile, one of Thenardier's soldiers reported to Zion that approximately 2,000 enemy troops appeared to be approaching. Their own army had been reduced to only 600 soldiers. Zion was baffled, wondering where Tigr Vormud had managed to find such a large force. One of his subordinates suggested deploying the Sky Dragon, but Zion immediately rejected the idea. He had already lost the Earth Dragon, and if the Sky Dragon were also defeated, he knew his father would be furious. Zion desperately searched for a way to end the battle in his favor. Eventually, he decided to withdraw his second division. His subordinate could not understand the decision. From his perspective, if the knights could hold their ground a little longer, they might still break through the enemy's defenses. Despite the objections, Zion firmly stood by his order. What Zion failed to realize was that the approaching force actually consisted of fewer than 100 soldiers. However, they were accompanied by 2,000 horses. Taking advantage of the fading sunlight at sunset, Tigr Vormud had created the illusion of a massive army. The knights were confused by Zion's order to retreat, especially when victory seemed within reach. Yet once the Knight Corps withdrew, the Jtid soldiers seized the opportunity. They broke through the weakened defenses and advanced toward Thenardier's main force. Zion had not expected events to unfold this way. Even so, he refused to accept defeat at the hands of Tigr Vormud. Before long, Tigr Vormud and his army had drawn near. Tigr Vormud had no intention of letting Zion escape after all the destruction he had caused in the city of Alsaka. Zion called Tigr Vormud a fool for betraying his country and seeking help from Jtid. He claimed that the hunter's blood running through Tigr Vormud's lineage was truly corrupted. Tigr Vormud responded that Zion was the one responsible for the suffering of innocent people. He had burned their homes and carried out widespread looting, making him nothing more than a thief. Zion showed no concern for the people, believing that they were no different from wild grass and not worth considering. Eleonora was genuinely disgusted by Zion's words. Tigr Vormund could not understand Zion's way of thinking and admitted that he was fighting solely to answer for the terrible things Zion had done within his territory. He could never forgive Zion for causing the people of Alsace to suffer. Unexpectedly, Zion proposed settling the war through a duel. Eleonora could hardly believe that Zion had truly lost his senses. Tigr Vormund immediately stepped forward, and although Eleonora could not understand his decision, she realized that this was Tigr Vormund's battle and that she had to let him face it himself. Zion told Tigr Vormund to borrow a sword or a spear, but Tigr Vormund replied that the bow was his weapon of choice. Zion doubted him, convinced that a bow could never be useful in a duel. Tigr Vormund fired an arrow toward Zion, but Zion easily blocked it with the armor protecting his arm. Tigr Vormund tried again, and once more Zion defended himself without difficulty. Zion laughed and claimed that no matter how many times Tigr Vormund tried, he would never succeed. Tigr Vormund continued firing arrows, which only irritated Zion further. Zion looked down on him, believing that anyone who entered a duel armed only with a bow would be doomed to fail on the battlefield. Zion then advanced, intending to bring the conflict to an end, while Tigr Vormund continued firing. This time, one of Tigr Vormund's arrows managed to pierce the protective guard on Zion's arm. Zion cried out in pain and dropped his sword. The arrow had struck his arm, leaving him unable to ignore the injury. Eleonora openly praised Tigr Vormund's incredible accuracy, amazed that he had repeatedly hit the same point on a moving target. She described Tigr Vormund as a truly remarkable man. The Thenardier forces immediately moved forward to assist Zion, while Eleonora and the Jhdid soldiers rushed in to protect Tigr Vormund. Soon, both armies were engaged in battle once again. Eleonora smiled at Tigr Vormund and admitted that she had never expected the outcome to unfold this way. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind swept through the area. To everyone's surprise, a sky dragon appeared and carried Zion away. Zion declared that his father would ensure the destruction of Alsace. He also had no intention of meeting his end there, which was why he chose to flee. Zion laughed with satisfaction as he escaped from the battlefield. The sky dragon soared higher and higher into the air. Unfortunately, the power of Eleonora's wind sword could not reach such a distance. Tigr Vormund could only watch as Zion attempted to escape. He wondered whether he should simply let him go. Suddenly, a voice urged Tigr Vormund to shoot the sky dragon. To his surprise, the voice had come from his own black bow. Tigr Vormund then remembered everything Zion had done to Tita. He raised his bow toward the sky, and unexpectedly, Eleonora's sword began lending its power to Tigr Vormund's weapon. Without hesitation, Tigr Vormund released an arrow. It shot upward at incredible speed, carrying the power of Eleonora's wind sword with it. Zion was stunned and could hardly believe what he was seeing as the arrow raced directly toward him. In an instant, the sky dragon was struck and fell from the sky. The Thenardier soldiers could only watch helplessly as defeat unfolded before them. Eleonora then announced that Tigr Vormund had successfully brought down Zion, the commander of the Thenardier forces. With Zion defeated by Tigr Vormund, the Thenardier army lost its will to continue fighting, and the territory of Alsace was finally saved. One morning, Tita finished preparing breakfast. She still could not believe that Tigr Vormund had finally returned home. She headed to his room to wake him up. To her surprise, when she opened the door, she found Eleonora leaning over Tigr Vormund while holding her sword near his face, as part of her unusual way of waking him up. Startled by the sight, Tita let out a loud cry. Tita could hardly believe that Eleonora would wake Tigr Vormund in such a manner. She became concerned that he might accidentally get hurt. Eleonora casually explained that Limalicia usually woke Tigr Vormund in a similar way. Wanting to avoid making a bigger issue out of it, Tigr Vormund asked Tita to let the matter go and instead wondered why Eleonora had come to his house so early in the morning. Eleonora explained that she was preparing to return to Jhdid and wanted to know what Tigr Vormund planned to do afterward. Eleonora met with Limalicia and informed her that she would return as soon as the royal army accepted her report. While Eleonora was still thinking about several remaining matters, Limalicia assured her that Rurik had already taken care of everything. Limalicia could not understand why Eleonora trusted Tigr Vormund so much. Eleonora explained that Tigr Vormund possessed abilities that were impossible to ignore, and for some reason, she simply could not dislike him. She wondered if Limalicia felt the same way. Although Limalicia could not completely deny it, those feelings alone were not enough for her to place full trust in Tigr Vormund. Eleonora understood her perspective and entrusted Tigr Vormund's well-being to Limalicia before departing. Meanwhile, Tigr Vormund noticed that Tita was dressed differently than usual. Tita explained that she wanted to accompany him to Hunaware village and had even prepared food for the trip. Tigr Vormund reminded her that he was going there to inspect the situation, not for a leisurely outing. However, Tita continued pleading to join him. In the end, Tigr Vormund agreed. He knew that Tita had gone through difficult experiences while he had been away, and he did not want to leave her behind again. Tita was overjoyed by his decision to let her accompany him to Hunaware village. The peace that currently covered Alsika had only been made possible because Thenardier's and Ganelon's forces had withdrawn. However, everyone understood that such peace would not last forever. Elsewhere, Felix Aaron was furious after Ganelon ordered a retreat upon learning that Thenardier's army had been driven back. As a result, Felix Aaron devised a new plan. He intended to send Suresh, a notorious guild of highly skilled assassins, to eliminate Tigr Vormund. As for Eleonora, Felix Aaron planned to pit one war maiden against another. At the same time, Tigr Vormund and Tita arrived at Hunaware village. Tigr Vormund felt relieved to see that the villagers were safe and unharmed. The villagers expressed their gratitude to him. They had followed his instructions and taken shelter in the forest, and fortunately, the enemy had never pursued them. Meanwhile, Eleonora arrived in Silesia, the capital of Jugdid, to answer for her actions before the king. Standing before King Victor, she faced questions regarding her decision to send troops into Brunn without first obtaining royal approval. Eleonora did not deny the accusation. King Victor then asked whether she had any justification that could satisfy him and determine an appropriate response to her actions. Eleonora calmly revealed that she had been hired. Her statement shocked everyone present. King Victor immediately demanded to know who had hired her. Eleonora explained that the person was Tigr Vormund, a nobleman of Brunn and the ruler of Alsace. Curious about his intentions, King Victor asked what Tigr Vormund hoped to achieve. Eleonora answered that Tigr Vormund's goal was peace for Alsace. King Victor found the explanation difficult to accept. He questioned whether Eleonora was truly willing to risk drawing their homeland into conflict for what seemed like such an idealistic reason. At that moment, Sofia stepped forward and shared her thoughts. In her view, Brunn was unlikely to involve Jugdid in its internal struggles. She believed that representatives from Brunn would soon arrive to ask why Jugdid had chosen to assist Tigr Vormund. Sofia felt confident that she could explain the circumstances if necessary. She also acknowledged that King Victor's criticism regarding the violation of their code of conduct was valid. Throughout history, many wars had begun under noble-sounding justifications that often concealed deeper motives. Not long afterward, a young woman named Ludmila approached Eleonora and criticized her behavior. In Ludmila's opinion, entering a battlefield without receiving permission from the kingdom was not fitting for someone who carried the title of War Maiden. Eleonora responded with a playful smile and remarked that Ludmila had not changed much at all. She teased her younger counterpart and suggested that she still had much to learn about showing respect to her elders. Ludmila fired back, arguing that Eleonora was hardly in a position to lecture others about proper conduct and manners. The exchange quickly became heated, and it looked as though the two might start arguing even more intensely. Before the situation could escalate, Sofia stepped in and firmly put a stop to their quarrel, restoring order once again. Sofia had warned them many times not to argue, but both Eleonora and Ludmila kept blaming each other. Sofia had to step in once again to bring them back to their senses. She then asked why Eleonora was still there. Eleonora thanked Sofia for helping her earlier in front of King Victor. She admitted that she had never intended to act behind anyone's back. Ludmila also commented on Eleonora's situation, but Eleonora quickly told her to leave because she was speaking with Sofia. Ludmila said she felt sorry for Lord Vorn for having to deal with someone like Eleonora. After saying that, Ludmila left the two of them alone. According to Sofia, it was probably better if Eleonora was not seen getting along too well with Ludmila, since Ludmila had close ties to Lord Thenardier. Hearing that surprised Eleonora. Sofia explained that this did not mean Ludmila liked Lord Thenardier. In fact, she disliked him. Eleonora wondered why Ludmila would choose to associate herself with Thenardier. It turned out that Ludmila's connection to Lord Thenardier had existed long before she was even born. Sofia said that Ludmila was a remarkable young woman who would never put her personal feelings above her responsibilities. Because of that, Lord Thenardier was not the only enemy standing in the way of Eleonora and Tigr Vormund. Urs was Tigr Vormund's father, and he was deeply loved by the people of Alsace. When Tigr Vormund was a child, he was very close to Tita. One day, Tita woke him up, and the two spent time playfully chasing each other around. Later, Urs asked Tigr Vormund to help him work in the fields. The hard labor left Tigr Vormund's hands sore and aching. Urs once told his son that no matter what circumstances they faced, they had to do their best to bring peace to the people of Alsace. That was the duty of both Tigr Vormund and his father as rulers of the land. Those memories found their way into Tigr Vormund's dream. He woke up while calling for his father and noticed Tita sleeping beside him. He gently tried to wake her up. As soon as Tita opened her eyes, she apologized for falling asleep after seeing how peacefully Tigr Vormund was resting. Tigr Vormund laughed and said he was sure she had simply been exhausted. Thanks to that brief rest, Tigr Vormund felt as though he had gained some clarity. He stepped outside, intending to go hunting. Tita held on to him and said that she wanted to stay by his side wherever he went. She believed she could help him just as he had once helped her. Hearing those words made Tigr Vormund realize that it was time for him to make an important decision. They soon returned home and saw Mashaz's horse standing outside. As soon as they entered, Tigr Vormund found Mashaz and Limalisha facing each other with obvious tension between them. Mashaz asked Tigr Vormund to explain everything. After hearing the full story, Mashaz apologized for suspecting Limalisha and her subordinates. Limalisha also apologized, explaining that she and her men had simply prepared themselves after spotting soldiers from another faction. Tigr Vormund apologized to Mashaz for involving him in trouble immediately after his arrival. Mashaz then asked what Tigr Vormund planned to do next. Tigr Vormund replied that he intended to oppose Lord Thenardier. Mashaz asked whether he planned to place himself under Ganelon's banner, but Tigr Vormund denied it. Mashaz then questioned whether he had truly thought through such an important decision. Tigr Vormund answered that he carried a responsibility inherited from his late father and toward all the people who depended on him. He still wanted to protect the land of Alsace because he was its lord. Afterward, Mashaz departed for the capital to discuss the matter with the King of Brünn and report Tigr Vormund's wishes. Meanwhile, Tigr Vormund traveled around seeking support. That night, he met with Hughes to ask for assistance. Hughes had already heard about the situation from Mashaz. According to Hughes, if the request had come directly from Tigr Vormund without any context, he probably would have refused, even though he believed Tigr Vormund was doing the right thing. From Hughes's perspective, Tigr Vormund alone could not compare to someone as influential as Thenardier. However, Hughes pointed out that Vorn's side was not supported only by Mashaz. Tigr Vormund also had allies from Jtid standing beside him. Because of that, Hughes believed Tigr Vormund was fully capable of challenging either Thenardier or Ganelon. Tigr Vormund then asked whether Hughes would be willing to help him. Hughes replied that Tigr Vormund was on the path toward building a powerful alliance, one strong enough to stand alongside figures such as Thenardier and Ganelon. In Hughes's view, while Thenardier and Ganelon claimed to serve the kingdom, they had forgotten about the conditions faced by the people living in their own territories. After that, Tigr Vormund and Limalisha headed to Kikimora's residence, a cottage located at the foot of the Vosges Mountains. There, they met with Eleonora. Eleonora informed Maximilian Benusa that she had already received the king's approval, but there were two troublesome conditions. If Eleonora successfully secured Alsace, she would have to hand over the entire region to the kingdom, meaning Alsace would become confiscated territory. They were also about to begin a new war, and the situation could change at any moment. What concerned her even more was what King Victor had said at the end of their meeting. He had instructed Eleonora to prioritize the interests of Jtid and to act wisely. Tigr Vormund asked whether that was not simply a reasonable request. Limalisha explained that the king had specifically emphasized putting the kingdom's interests first. For example, if someone from Thenardier's side could persuade Jtid to support their faction, there was little doubt that Jtid would become involved in the conflict. Tigr Vormund was surprised and asked whether Eleonora and Limalisha truly believed that was possible. Eleonora replied that King Victor had explained that such an approach was the proper way to ensure everything proceeded smoothly. To King Victor, it was not particularly important who won the war. What mattered was whether the outcome benefited the kingdom. If it did, the kingdom would support that direction. Not long afterward, a knock was heard at the door and Limalisha went to check. According to Eleonora, it would be a mistake to assume that the nobles of Jtid would remain inactive. Everyone in her country acted according to the king's will. Beneath the king were the 7 war maidens, and below them were the nobles of Jtid. The problem was that not all of the war maidens were supporting them, nor were all of them opposing them. At the moment, Eleonora only had difficulties with one of them. She described that person as a very talkative woman who lacked proper manners. Suddenly, Ludmila arrived and immediately objected to Eleonora's remarks. Eleonora wondered why Limalisha had allowed Ludmila to enter the place. Limalisha admitted that she did not have the authority to oppose the wishes of a war maiden. Ludmila introduced herself as a war maiden of Jtid who carried the noble title associated with the spear capable of piercing anything. Tigr Vormund introduced himself as well and attempted to shake her hand, but Eleonora firmly pointed out that Ludmila was not their guest. Ludmila was pleased that her trip to meet Tigr Vormund had not been in vain. She invited him to speak somewhere else. Tigr Vormund and Ludmila stepped outside, though Eleonora and Limalisha continued to follow them. Ludmila informed Tigr Vormund that Thenardier's forces and his allies were receiving considerable support from outside Brünn, and she herself was one of those supporters. She believed Tigr Vormund had little chance of achieving victory. Before long, they discovered signs of a trap. Limalisha became convinced that they were surrounded by assassins. Eleonora believed the assassins were targeting Tigr Vormund because, if he were eliminated, Lord Thenardier would certainly celebrate the opportunity. In that case, Thenardier could potentially drive Eleonora out of Brünn. Moments later, an arrow shot through the air. Fortunately, Tigr Vormund managed to avoid it. The archer revealed himself and fired another arrow, but Eleonora easily deflected the attack. Tigr Vormund successfully subdued one of the attackers. They were Serash operatives acting under the orders of Lord Thenardier. Lai Militia managed to defeat one of the Serash members, but she was unable to avoid a snake that bit her in the chest area. Eleonora immediately cut the snake down. Lai Militia's strength quickly faded, and she collapsed. Tigr Vormund reacted swiftly and caught her before she hit the ground. He then provided first aid and removed the snake's venom from the wound. Eleonora appeared visibly worried. Suddenly, a larger group of Serash operatives approached. Seeing the danger, Ludmila unleashed her ice powers and neutralized the entire group in an instant. Tigr Vormund was amazed by Ludmila's strength. Ludmila could not understand how Eleonora had become so unsettled by the situation. In her opinion, Eleonora's reaction was not what one would expect from a war maiden. Ludmila then left to find a physician, saying that they would meet again in Rodnik. Tigr Vormund thanked her for saving all of them. He also reassured Eleonora that there was no need to worry, and together they continued their journey. On that day, Lai Militia and Eleonora were relaxing together in a hot spring. Eleonora felt relieved knowing that Lai Militia was safe and unharmed. Lai Militia admitted that she had survived thanks to Eleonora and the others. Eleonora said that she was actually a little frustrated because she now owed Ludmila a favor. She also mentioned that Tigr Vormund's actions during the incident had been quite impressive, while she herself had only been able to panic in the situation. Because of that, Eleonora intended to give Tigr Vormund a reward. Meanwhile, Tigr Vormund was about to enjoy the hot spring as well. He was surprised to find Ludmila already there. The unexpected encounter immediately caught him off guard. Ludmila approached him and pointed her weapon in his direction. Tigr Vormund asked whether she was not uncomfortable being seen in such a situation. Ludmila replied that she regarded him no differently than a pet and realized that he had not entered on purpose. Tigr Vormund admitted that it had been a complete accident and apologized for entering without knowing someone was already there. Even after his apology, Ludmila still expressed her displeasure by giving him a harsh reprimand. After they finished bathing, Tigr Vormund walked around with Eleonora, Lai Militia, and Ludmila. Eleonora asked how his visit to the hot spring had gone. Tigr Vormund immediately suspected that she might have been the one who had arranged the earlier incident involving Ludmila. As they passed several food stalls, Ludmila claimed that she had no interest in trying food sold by roadside vendors. Unfortunately, she was genuinely hungry at the time. Eleonora deliberately ate her meal with great enthusiasm just to tease her. Lai Militia noticed that Eleonora was not acting very maturely. Ludmila became visibly annoyed by Eleonora's behavior. A short while later, Tigr Vormund offered some food to Ludmila and encouraged her to try it. At first she refused. However, Tigr Vormund explained that the food was meant as an apology for what had happened earlier. Ludmila eventually accepted it as a sign that she appreciated his sincerity, especially since she already knew who had been responsible for the entire situation. She ended up enjoying the food very much. Seeing that, Eleonora immediately scolded Tigr Vormund. She wondered why he was being so kind to Ludmila. Their argument quickly attracted the attention of nearby people, causing Eleonora to feel somewhat embarrassed. Ludmila commented that Tigr Vormund was indeed a good man. However, she believed that he was too deeply influenced by Eleonora, which made her lose interest in him as a person worth further attention. Eleonora responded that Ludmila's view of both her and Tigr Vormund was amusing. She believed that what Ludmila really meant was that she could not see Tigr Vormund's true potential. Shortly afterward, Ludmila left them behind. Eleonora then asked Lai Militia to strengthen their defenses as soon as they arrived in Leitmeritz. Lai Militia wondered whether Ludmila was planning to take action against them. As it turned out, Eleonora's suspicion was correct. Ludmila had already moved her forces to the border of Leitmeritz. Because of this, Eleonora found herself caught between the forces of Count Thenardier and Ludmila, exactly as Thenardier had hoped. He wanted additional pressure placed on Eleonora. According to Eleonora, the enemy's troop deployment was far more intelligent than Zion's. Tigr Vormund asked whether she intended to fight Ludmila. Eleonora replied that Ludmila might actually want such a confrontation more than she appeared to. Lai Militia found this confusing because Ludmila seemed to gain very little from defeating Eleonora. Eleonora explained that Ludmila could secure Olmutz's safety by placing herself under Thenardier's protection. Eleonora then said that the final decision should be left to Tigr Vormund. She told him that he was free to look away from the conflict if he wished. He could also direct troops toward Alsika, so they would be prepared to deal with Thenardier or Ganelin. Ultimately, the choice was his. Tigr Vormund acknowledged that this was his battle. In addition, they had a responsibility to protect the Augur noble family, which had already agreed to support him. He eventually decided to send a message to Ludmila. Unfortunately, Ludmila rejected the peace proposal he sent. The forces of Leitmeritz began to mobilize, while the army of Olmutz prepared itself for battle. Meanwhile, Ludmila informed her subordinates that Eleonora was approaching. Some of them questioned whether she was truly certain about fighting Eleonora. Ludmila explained that the close relationship between House Lori and House Thenardier had existed for more than 80 years. She could not allow that bond to be broken so easily, especially after inheriting the honor and responsibility associated with it. The battle took place on the plains of Blycolin near the Tatra Mountains. As soon as the signal for battle was given, archers from both sides released volleys of arrows. The clash soon escalated into close-range combat involving spears and swords. Tigr Vormund focused on shooting the enemy forces in front of him. Even though the soldiers of Olmutz wore heavy armor, he was still able to guide his arrows with remarkable precision and strike vulnerable areas. His skill and strength as an archer were truly extraordinary. In the end, the first engagement concluded without a decisive outcome. Both sides withdrew to their respective camps after suffering significant losses and exhaustion, with neither army gaining a clear advantage over the other. That night, Eleonora asked what Tigr Vormund thought about Ludmila's army. In Tigr Vormund's opinion, they seemed to have exceptionally high morale. No matter how hard they were pushed back, they always managed to recover and return to the fight. Eleonora explained that Ludmila focused heavily on defense and probably possessed the strongest defensive capabilities among the war maidens, even though her offensive tactics could be incredibly formidable. Militia admitted that she had never personally seen Ludmila take the battlefield herself. Eleonora was confident that Ludmila would not be able to defeat her. The next day, she intended to meet Ludmila on the front lines and overcome her forces. Militia asked about Eleonora's win-loss record against Ludmila. Eleonora replied that she held a 2-to-1 advantage over Ludmila. Militia pointed out that when she had asked Ludmila the same question, Ludmila had claimed the exact opposite. In Militia's view, it seemed that Eleonora and Ludmila were actually evenly matched, but both insisted that they were the one with more victories. Eleonora explained that Leitmeritz and Olmutz had been rivals for generations. For several generations, war maidens had often been chosen from the Louis family, including during the time when Ludmila's mother and grandmother were at the height of their influence. Tigr Vormund asked whether war maidens were selected through bloodlines. Eleonora explained that war maidens were chosen by the dragon relics. She promised to explain the details another time because, for now, they needed to focus on the battle that lay ahead. The Olmutz army had already retreated back to their fortress. Militia reported that the enemy appeared to be moving toward the Tatra Mountains. Eleonora realized that she had likely overlooked something. Tigr Vormund even suspected that this had been Ludmila's objective from the very beginning. Eleonora came to the conclusion that the previous day's battle had merely been a diversion. There was only one route leading to Ludmila's Tatra castle. Every corner of the fortress had been designed with extraordinary defensive features capable of repelling enemy attacks. Tigr Vormund described Ludmila's castle as a stronghold built to withstand any assault. It turned out that Ludmila had already frozen key strategic areas with the power of Lavias. The castle's elevated position gave it a major advantage over any possible approach routes used by attackers. Eleonora was certain that even her predecessors must have struggled when dealing with that fortress. Nevertheless, she remained confident that victory would ultimately be hers. Once the battle began, the situation quickly turned unfavorable for the Leitmeritz army. Their forces were steadily pushed back, and the war gradually shifted in favor of Olmutz. That night, Eleonora refused to accept the situation. If things continued this way, the enemy would gain complete control of the battlefield. She believed that the freezing temperatures were reducing the combat effectiveness of the Leitmeritz soldiers. Eleonora planned to use Ereful to fly over the battlefield, enter the castle from above, and launch a direct attack from within. Militia immediately asked Tigr Vormund to convince Eleonora to reconsider because the plan was far too risky. Eleonora asked Tigr Vormund to trust her, reminding him that she was his ruler and that he should follow her orders. Tigr Vormund admitted that he valued Eleonora greatly, but he did not want her taking such reckless risks again. Eleonora then asked whether she was truly that important to him. Tigr Vormund remained silent because above all else, Alsace was what mattered most to him. Eleonora laughed and remarked that Tigr Vormund truly loved his homeland. She did not take offense because, in her eyes, both Alsace and Tigr Vormund belonged under her protection. She jokingly commented that if Tigr Vormund had mentioned another woman instead, she might have reacted far less kindly. She appreciated his thoughtful answer and was pleased to hear it. Afterward, Eleonora asked Tigr Vormund to come up with another solution. Tigr Vormund then presented a single request. The following day, Tigr Vormund walked through the snow wearing a bearskin outfit. Earlier, Militia had provided the bearskin because she had heard that such clothing was commonly used by hunters. Wearing it would help avoid attracting suspicion from the enemy. Eleonora questioned whether the idea would actually work. Tigr Vormund assured her that he could create an opportunity for her to launch an attack. Eventually, Tigr Vormund ran low on supplies and used his bow to hunt an animal that passed nearby. Before long, Ludmila appeared. She asked the person dressed in bearskin whether he was the one who had shot the animal. Tigr Vormund calmly retrieved his arrow from the animal and asked whether Ludmila felt cold in the harsh weather. Ludmila replied that she was different from ordinary people and therefore had no trouble enduring the cold. She still seemed doubtful that the person in the bearskin costume had truly been the one who made the shot. In response, Tigr Vormud demonstrated his skill by firing an arrow at a distant snow-covered tree. After witnessing his remarkable accuracy, Ludmila apologized for doubting him. Tigr Vormud could not help being surprised that Ludmila was willing to admit her mistakes so honestly. They continued talking while preparing the game they had hunted. Ludmila wondered why the man refused to remove his bearskin clothing, since the cold of the snowy mountains should not have affected anyone standing near her. Tigr Vormud explained that his village had a tradition that forbade hunters from removing their bearskins while they were in the mountains. Introducing himself as Urs, Tigr Vormud listened as Ludmila overlooked his earlier lack of manners after witnessing his remarkable abilities. Impressed by his skills, she expressed interest in having him work for her, believing that someone with such talent would be a valuable ally. Tigr Vormud explained that he had come from a distant land and had every intention of returning to his homeland someday. He also wondered whether Ludmila suspected him of being a spy. In her view, however, it would not have been surprising for hunters or travelers to find their way to that remote area. Ludmila then prepared a cup of her special hot tea for him. Tigr Vormud found the drink delicious, and hearing that brought a smile to her face. She took pride in the tea, believing it had the power to warm both the body and the spirit. Tigr Vormud found himself surprised by how naturally she smiled. Curious about why Ludmila was alone, Tigr Vormud asked about her situation. She explained that she simply needed some time to clear her mind. In response, he shared a lesson from an old tale about a hole and a tree, suggesting that whatever troubled her heart, she should remember the wisdom hidden within that story. Ludmila began to feel that the man before her was genuinely kind. She went on to explain that when she became a war maiden, she had already accepted the responsibilities that came with the position. Even though she was not serving her own homeland, she still had to endure working alongside people she did not particularly like. To preserve her dignity and fulfill her duties, she often set aside her personal feelings. After their conversation came to an end, Ludmila prepared to leave. She assured him that she would remember their meeting and even invited him to visit her again if the opportunity arose. Once she was gone, Tigr Vormud resumed following the trail she had left behind. He knew that if the sun set before he found his way, tracking the footprints would become much more difficult. Eventually, his efforts paid off and he discovered a route leading to Tatra Castle. The following day, the soldiers of Leitmeritz advanced along the path Tigr Vormud had uncovered. The defenses in that area appeared relatively light, making it seem possible to break through. However, the situation had changed from what Tigr Vormud had previously reported. It seemed that Ludmila had become more cautious after her encounter with him. Tigr Vormud wondered whether Eleonora intended to retreat, but she immediately dismissed the idea. She believed their enemies would only grow more confident if they withdrew. Without hesitation, Eleonora rushed toward the gate and unleashed the power of Lay Admos through Arifol. Unfortunately, the attack failed to break the gate. To her surprise, enemy archers had already prepared their positions and were ready to strike. Seeing the danger, Tigr Vormud stepped forward and pulled Eleonora back. She was puzzled by his actions, believing that one more attack might have been enough to destroy the gate. Tigr Vormud pointed out that she would have become an easy target for the archers. Realizing the risk, Eleonora reconsidered the situation. Tigr Vormud suspected that the enemy forces had already become aware of their presence. Calling upon Arifol, he asked to borrow its power once more. Arifol answered his request, granting him tremendous strength. With their resolve renewed, Tigr Vormud and Eleonora prepared for another assault. Drawing his bow, Tigr Vormud channeled the immense power provided by Arifol. When he released the arrow, the attack struck with incredible force and shattered the castle gate. Seizing the opportunity, Eleonora immediately ordered her troops to storm Tatra Castle together. Inside the castle, Ludmila could hardly believe that the gate had been destroyed. The sight filled her with intense determination as she prepared for the confrontation ahead. Meanwhile, Eleonora, Tigr Vormud, and their soldiers pressed forward against the defenders standing before them. As night fell, the flames of battle spread throughout Tatra Castle, and the long-awaited clash between the war maidens drew ever closer. That night, the battle between the armies of Leitmeritz and Olmutz continued. Eleonora courageously faced the enemies standing before her. Before long, Tigr Vormud successfully brought down an archer who had been aiming at Eleonora. In response, Eleonora smiled in his direction. Ludmila then appeared and was surprised that Eleonora had the courage to launch an attack. She asked whether Eleonora intended to display such a lack of elegance while facing her. Eleonora admitted that she was grateful for Ludmila's help some time ago and acknowledged that she owed her a debt of gratitude. She believed that she would gladly repay that favor in the future. The two women soon engaged in battle. Ludmila unleashed Klelo Zamkafa, freezing the surrounding area with its power. Eleonora answered with Arifar, empowered by Lay Admos, clearing away everything that stood in her path. Ludmila quickly leaped aside to avoid the attack. Eleonora asked how it felt to be looked down upon by someone she had always underestimated. The clash between Ludmila and Eleonora was truly remarkable. The powers of Lavias and Arifar were so impressive that everyone watching could only stare in amazement. Both warriors suffered the effects of each other's attacks. Several soldiers attempted to assist Eleonora, but she refused their help. She was convinced that her battle with Ludmila would soon reach its conclusion and that there was no need for anyone else to intervene. Ludmila agreed that it was time to settle the fight. Suddenly, a Sirish appeared in the middle of their confrontation. With perfect timing, Tigr Vormud released an arrow that struck the creature directly. Seeing this, Ludmila became convinced that Tigr Vormud was the same Urz she had encountered before. Meanwhile, Tigr Vormud found himself wondering who the Sirish had actually been targeting. Afterward, Ludmila asked Tigr Vormud why he had saved her. In her view, with his skill, he could have waited until the Sirish dealt with her before eliminating the threat himself. Tigr Vormud replied that she could consider it a gesture of thanks for the tea she had served him previously. Regardless of Ludmila's reputation or status as a Vanadis, he genuinely believed that her tea was excellent. Ludmila then asked what he wanted from her. Tigr Vormud requested only one thing, that she remain neutral. She found it strange that he was not asking her to join his side. Tigr Vormud admitted that he would certainly welcome her support, but he had nothing valuable to offer in return. Because of that, he felt it would be unfair to ask her to commit herself to his cause. Ludmila wondered whether he truly sought nothing from the war. Tigr Vormud explained that Alsace was enough for him. As long as his homeland remained peaceful, he had no desire to ask for anything more. Ludmila laughed when she heard those words. Nearby, Eleonora seemed somewhat displeased by how friendly the two appeared. According to Ludmila, sincerity was important, but it would not solve every problem. Even so, she appreciated Tigr Vormud's honesty. Ludmila then declared that from that day forward, she would no longer support the noble Thenardier in Brun's civil war. The soldiers were astonished by her decision. Tigr Vormud expressed his gratitude. After formally announcing her neutrality, Ludmila chose to withdraw from the conflict. Eleonora also stopped concerning herself with Ludmila's territory. As a result, their attention became fully focused on the struggle against Thenardier. Elsewhere, Thenardier had already prepared a new strategy. By making use of Brun's king, he arranged for a knight to be dispatched. That knight was Roland, the legendary Black Knight of Brun and the wielder of the holy sword Durandal. Since becoming commander of the Navarre forces, Roland had ensured that Brun's western border remained completely secure. One day, a royal order arrived for Roland. The king's command was clear: eliminate the rebel known as Tigr Vormud, the Lord of Alsace. A month after the battle at Olmutz, Tigr Vormud returned to Brun accompanied by 5,000 Jdid soldiers. Hughes was deeply grateful to Tigr Vormud. He believed that if Tigr Vormud had chosen to dominate the conflict at Olmutz, his own territory would have been placed in danger. As a sign of appreciation, Hughes assigned many of his soldiers to assist Tigr Vormud. Although Hughes admitted that his troops were not particularly strong, they were numerous, and he hoped they would prove useful. Tigr Vormud sincerely thanked Hughes for the support. Soon afterward, Tigr Vormud led his forces toward the western border of Territor. They established a camp near the city of Nemedicum, which was under Thenardier's control. While resting there, Tigr Vormud spent some time talking with his companions. Eleonora suggested that their army should be called the Silver Dragon Army. Limalesha felt somewhat embarrassed by the name, but Eleonora insisted that no better name existed. Eleonora then asked Tigr Vormud whether he thought Silver Dragon Army was a good choice. Limalesha hoped he would think more carefully because the dignity of their forces was at stake. She wished he could come up with something more reasonable than Silver Dragon. Tigr Vormud turned to Tita for an opinion, but she could not think of an alternative either. At that moment, Rurik arrived and reported that another fight had broken out among the troops. Tigr Vormud immediately left with Rurik to investigate. Eleonora wondered whether everything would be alright. In her opinion, conflicts were bound to happen when an army was made up of people from many different backgrounds. Limalesha pointed out that Mashas had still not returned from the capital. She wondered whether the royal court had actually received the petition that Tigr Vormud had sent. Meanwhile, Tigr Vormud shot an arrow into the sky to stop the fight between his soldiers. He asked them to explain why the conflict had started. To his surprise, the argument had begun over something incredibly trivial: a disagreement about the shape of a cloud. Afterward, Tigr Vormud and his troops continued their journey to Sanier, which had become something of a capital city for the region. Sanier served as a place where disputes between villages were resolved, and many travelers regularly stopped there. Tigr Vormud hoped he might be able to gather some information about the situation in the capital. The leader of Sanier was ready to provide military supplies in support of Tigr Vormud's forces, since the peace and stability the region now enjoyed were largely thanks to him. The negotiations went smoothly, but unfortunately, Tigr Vormud was unable to learn anything new about the capital. Rurik asked what their plans were afterward. Hughes wanted to return home. Tigr Vormud offered to escort him, but Hughes declined. Instead, he suggested that Tigr Vormud take some time to relax and enjoy himself since the area was filled with interesting shops. That day, Tigr Vormund spent some quiet time alone by the river, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. Before long, a small dragon approached him. He caught the little creature, causing it to tumble into the river. The dragon turned out to be Luni, Eleonora's pet dragon. Luni suddenly flew away when Sophia arrived looking for the dragon. Sophia rushed toward Tigr Vormund without realizing he was there. The unexpected collision caused both of them to fall into the river. From above, Luni simply watched the scene unfold. Tigr Vormund was clearly startled by the sudden encounter. Sophia quickly asked whether he was alright. Since Tigr Vormund did not recognize her, he asked who she was. A moment later, Eleonora called out, asking whether Sophia had managed to find Luni. She was slightly surprised to discover Sophia and Tigr Vormund together by the river. Sophia informed her that Luni was flying above them. After that, Sophia introduced herself to Tigr Vormund. She explained that she was one of the 7 war maidens. Tigr Vormund apologized for the earlier misunderstanding. Sophia admitted that the incident had caught her completely off guard and left her somewhat embarrassed. Sophia then explained that she had come on official business. She said that King Victor had become concerned about the conflicting reports regarding Brun's situation. She had been sent to deliver a message. According to Sophia, the King of Brun was in poor health due to an illness, which was why she had not yet been able to meet him personally. For the time being, she could only share the information she had regarding the current situation. Eleonora asked whether Sophia had explained that her presence there was the result of Tigr Vormund's invitation, and that Jikted had no involvement in the matter. In addition, Sophia delivered a message from the king specifically for Tigr Vormund. The royal government had declared Tigr Vormund guilty because of his recent actions and had revoked all of his noble privileges. As a result, Alsace was now officially under the control of the kingdom. Until the situation stabilized, the royal decision could not be challenged, and anyone who opposed it would be regarded as a rebel. Tigr Vormund was shocked to hear the news. Sophia explained that she had originally expected the royal government to deliver the message directly to Tigr Vormund. However, she suggested that he could later ask Mashas for a more detailed explanation. Limalisha then asked whether Sophia knew Mashas personally. It turned out that Sophia had met him in the city of Nice. At the time, Mashas had told her that he would come as soon as he had finished handling matters within his territory. That was the reason Sophia had come to meet Tigr Vormund instead. Tita felt relieved after hearing this, as it meant that Mashas was safe and doing well. Tigr Vormund never expected the kingdom to label him a rebel. Eleonora then asked about the other war maidens. Sophia explained that Elizaveta had a good relationship with the nobles Thenardier and Ganelon. Valentina was far away from Brun and was unlikely to get involved for the time being. Olga was traveling somewhere with her dragon, and Alexandra was still recovering from her illness. According to Sophia, Eleonora did not need to worry about them because they would not take action the way Ludmila had. What truly deserved their attention was the kingdom's response toward Tigr Vormund, who had already been declared a rebel. One of the kingdom's strongest forces was the Navarre army. At the same time, the Navarre troops led by Roland were heading toward their location. Roland was known as the Black Knight and was considered the strongest man in Brun. Tigr Vormund mentioned that he had heard of Roland before. Eleonora was surprised that Tigr Vormund, who lived so far from the center of the kingdom, was familiar with Roland's reputation. Hughes explained that Roland had become a soldier at the age of 13 and had never been defeated. When Roland was appointed to lead Navarre, the king entrusted him with one of the kingdom's treasured heirlooms, Durandal. The Navarre forces had sworn loyalty to the king and would only act under his direct orders. Several parties had attempted negotiations, but the Navarre army still chose to fight. As a result, the messengers sent by Lord Auger and those sent by Tigr Vormund were forced to return empty-handed. The nobles who supported Tigr Vormund were frustrated by the situation. Their enemies were supposed to be Thenardier and Ganelon, yet the royal army had become involved as well. They could not bring themselves to openly oppose the kingdom. Hughes then asked whether those nobles would place greater trust in the Navarre army than in the assistance coming from Jikted. Tigr Vormund pointed out that Thenardier's cruelty and Ganelon's cunning were nothing new, yet the kingdom had never completely crushed them. It seemed that the royal forces acted only according to the king's commands. Tigr Vormund firmly stated that he and his allies would fight to protect their honor and everything they believed in. Hughes agreed, saying that was exactly why they stood alongside the Jikted forces instead of the kingdom. That day, the Silver Dragon Knights prepared themselves on the Orange Plains. Across from them, the Navarre army stood ready with their spears. The battle soon began. Roland personally led the Navarre troops into combat. He pushed forward with remarkable skill, defeating enemy soldiers who stood in his path. His presence on the battlefield was overwhelming. Seeing this, Eleonora ordered Limalisha to take command of the Silver Dragon Knights while she advanced to confront Roland herself. Roland's strength was undeniable. It had been a very long time since anyone had been able to match his swordsmanship. Curious, Roland asked who Eleonora really was. Eleonora introduced herself as one of the war maidens. Roland realized that he had never met someone as powerful as her. He stated that he did not care about Eleonora's reasons for participating in the war, but he could not overlook the fact that she had entered Brünn without the king's permission. Before long, several Silver Dragon Knights moved forward to support Eleonora. She could not understand why they had advanced at that moment. Roland quickly drove them back with his sword. Eleonora once again faced Roland in a fierce clash of blades. Both warriors displayed extraordinary skill. As the battle continued, Eleonora felt that the situation could become increasingly dangerous if it was allowed to continue. She was thrown from her horse and briefly considered using dragon magic, but she hesitated because Roland was still a human opponent. Roland continued pressing forward toward her position. Not long afterward, Tigr Vormund arrived to assist Eleonora. Roland called Tigr Vormund reckless for attempting an attack from such close range. He immediately directed his attention toward him. In response, Tigr Vormund fired an arrow high into the air. He then quickly helped Eleonora retreat from the battlefield. Roland immediately pursued them. However, the arrow that Tigr Vormund had fired earlier struck Roland's horse, causing it to lose its footing and fall. Roland was certain that the shot had been carefully calculated rather than fired at random. Meanwhile, Eleonora thanked Tigr Vormund and felt certain that Roland must have been surprised by his skill. Soon afterward, Tigr Vormund's strength faded and he lost consciousness. At the same time, enemy troops began drawing closer. Fortunately, Sofia arrived to help them. She instructed Eleonora to take Tigr Vormund away as quickly as possible while she dealt with the approaching soldiers. As the Navarra forces closed in, Sofia struck her staff against the ground and called upon the radiant power of Falvarna. Sofia slammed her staff into the ground and then used the power of Falvarna's light. In an instant, she managed to drive back all of Navarre's forces. Only Roland remained. Roland realized that he could not get any closer to the wall of light created by Sofia. He asked whether the wall of light was a combination of several different spells. Sofia confirmed it. After hearing that, Roland declared that nothing could stop him or Durandal. Sofia realized that Roland was indeed a dangerous opponent. Roland then shattered Sofia's wall of light with his sword. He advanced and launched an attack on Sofia. Sofia acknowledged Roland's abilities and remarked that their battle had gone on long enough. She then chose to disappear from the battlefield. Roland realized that Sofia had merely been buying time for her allies. Meanwhile, Eleonora was riding on horseback with Tigr Vormund. She hoped that Tigr Vormund could hold on a little longer because they were almost back at camp. At the same time, one of Roland's subordinates approached him and reported that a force of 300 soldiers was advancing toward their position. The troops were reinforcements for Tigr Vormund, led by Mashas. Roland ordered his men to receive them and focus on disrupting their formation first. Earlier, Roland had been unable to meet His Majesty the King. Maximilian Benusa of House Ganelin and Felix Aaron of House Thenardier had prevented him from seeing the king, claiming that His Majesty was ill. They also urged Roland to quickly eliminate Tigr Vormund and all of the Jicted forces that had entered Brünn, supposedly to ease the king's concerns. They further claimed that they would handle the threats posed by Sackstein and Isvar along the border, allowing Roland to focus entirely on his mission. Although Roland did not fully trust the words of Felix Aaron and Maximilian Benusa, he felt that he needed to act quickly and meet His Majesty as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the Silver Dragon soldiers were resting and receiving treatment at the camp. Eleonora was deeply grateful to Mashas and his troops for preventing Roland from continuing his pursuit. Mashas asked about Tigr Vormund's condition. Unfortunately, Tigr Vormund's fever still had not gone down. Tita faithfully remained by his side, deeply worried about her master. At the same time, Eleonora and the others gathered together while Hughes asked Mashas to explain the situation in the capital. Mashas admitted that he had been unable to meet His Majesty and had therefore searched for another way into the palace. Once there, he discovered that Felix Aaron and Maximilian Benusa had effectively taken control of the palace and the situation had become chaotic. Prime Minister Pierre met with Mashas and helped him gain an audience with the king. Pierre explained that everything discussed there was highly confidential and not meant for the general public. Inside, His Majesty was quietly playing with wooden blocks. It turned out that the king was still suffering from the loss of his son. Only a small number of people knew about his condition. Eleonora was certain that Felix Aaron and Maximilian Benusa were among those who knew the truth. Mashas explained that Pierre had told him that, regardless of the circumstances, Tigr Vormund would need a convincing explanation for bringing foreign troops into Brünn. Hughes believed that if Tigr Vormund could prove that he posed no threat to Brünn, there was a possibility that His Majesty would pardon him. Hughes still could not accept the idea of Tigr Vormund being branded a rebel. Mashas then revealed that Felix Aaron and Maximilian Benusa had issued false orders to Roland. Curious, Eleonora asked how Mashas had met Sofia. Mashas wondered whether Sofia had not already explained it. Sofia admitted that as soon as she arrived, she had immediately become caught up in the conflict, and she felt it was not her place to speak about matters that were not hers to reveal. Mashas then recounted what had happened after his meeting with Pierre. As he was preparing to leave, he was suddenly surrounded by hired assassins. At that very moment, Sophia appeared and quickly defeated them all. The assassins had likely been sent by House Thenardier or House Ganelin. In short, Sophia was the one who saved Mashaz. That night, several soldiers asked about Tigre Vormud's condition. Bertrand told them not to worry too much about it. Eleonora then asked Bertrand who those soldiers actually were. Bertrand explained that they were troops who had arrived alongside Hughes. Apparently, one of them had heard about Roland's attack on Tigre Vormud. Later, Eleonora went to check on Tigre Vormud herself. She asked Tita to leave them alone for a while because she had something important to tell him. Tita looked hesitant at first, but eventually agreed. Before leaving, she asked Eleonora to call for her if anything happened. Tita then waited outside the camp with Bertrand. Bertrand was certain that Tigre Vormud would be extremely grateful to Tita for everything she had done for him. At that moment, Eleonora held Tigre Vormud's hand. She thought he probably would not hear her because he was asleep. Eleonora hoped Tigre Vormud could hear her heartbeat through the touch of their hands. She hoped he could understand how she felt. Eleonora said that she would use her army to protect everything Tigre Vormud wanted to protect because he belonged to her. Later that night, Eleonora stood alone beneath the night sky. Sophia approached her and remarked that it looked like rain might fall before long. Sophia asked whether Eleonora truly intended to use dragon magic even though her opponents were ordinary humans. She admitted that she was willing to help Eleonora. Eleonora reminded Sophia that she had only come to deliver a message and that joining the battle would put her in danger. Sophia replied that Eleonora had already made up her mind. She also admitted that she found Tigre Vormud interesting. Eleonora smiled and confidently stated that Tigre Vormud already belonged to her. That same night, Roland asked Olivier whether Tigre Vormud had any previous connection to Jicted. Olivier firmly explained that although Tigre Vormud's territory was located near the border, he had never had any ties with Jicted before. Roland wondered how Tigre Vormud had managed to gain their trust so quickly. Olivier explained that, in the past, the nobleman Thenardier had attempted to attack Alsace while Tigre Vormud was away. Roland questioned whether that information could be trusted, and Olivier replied that he had heard it from several different sources. Although Roland still appeared doubtful, he decided to continue with the plan. To him, the undeniable fact was that Jicted's army was on Brun's soil, and that alone was enough reason to move forward. The following day, Eleonora and the Silver Dragon army marched toward the battlefield. At the same time, Tigre Vormud woke up and found himself back at camp. He noticed Tita sitting beside him. Tigre Vormud remembered that Roland had struck him down during the previous battle. Looking at his weakened condition, he wondered how he could possibly protect everyone else. Suddenly, he sensed something unusual coming from the Black Bough. Tita opened her eyes and realized that Tigre Vormud was awake. Bertrand was still asleep at the time, and Tigre Vormud decided to leave the camp with Tita. Tigre Vormud apologized for making her accompany him, but Tita replied that she had already promised to follow him wherever he went. Tigre Vormud did not know where the Black Bough was leading him. Even though his body ached with every step, he continued forward. Together, he and Tita passed through a thick wall of mist. Before long, they arrived at an ancient castle. Meanwhile, the Silver Dragon army had reached the battlefield. The wounded soldiers remained behind at the camp while the rest moved into position. Ahead of them stood Navarre's forces, prepared in a crescent-shaped formation. Navarre's 1st Division would focus on weakening the enemy's defenses. The 2nd Division would strike at the enemy's flanks. The 3rd Division would cover a wider area and attack from the sides while the enemy attempted to launch a counterattack. By repeatedly executing these coordinated maneuvers, they could overwhelm their opponents through discipline and teamwork. In terms of strategy, Brun's knightly forces held the advantage. The battle began, and Olivier immediately ordered the 1st Division to advance. Meanwhile, Tigre Vormud and Tita entered the old castle. Tigre Vormud had no idea what kind of place it was. Inside, they discovered carvings on the castle walls. Tita guessed that they depicted Tir Na Fa, the goddess who dwelled between night and darkness, a deity associated with shadows and the passage of life. Tigre Vormud called out, wondering whether Tir Na Fa was the one who had brought him there. Suddenly, Tita became possessed by Tir Na Fa's spirit. Through Tita, Tir Na Fa explained that she had not summoned Tigre Vormud. However, she believed that he had come seeking power. At the same time, the battle continued outside. Many soldiers of the Silver Dragon army were being defeated by Roland and his forces. Tir Na Fa told Tigre Vormud that at that very moment, his companions were fighting and falling one after another. Tigre Vormud asked whether, if he truly needed power, Tir Na Fa would show him the way to obtain it. Tir Na Fa agreed to grant him power, but only if he could prove the strength of his determination. She instructed Tigre Vormud to draw his bow and aim at Tita as a test of his resolve and the depth of his feelings. If the Black Bough recognized and accepted his conviction, Tir Na Fa promised that she would grant him greater power. Tigre Vormud then asked whether Tir Na Fa would release Tita if he refused to carry out the test. Tir Na Fa responded by reminding him that Tita was also someone deeply important to him. Tigr Vormund immediately drew his bow to show Tir na Fa the strength of his determination. Tir na Fa smiled and remarked that she already seemed to know what Tigr Vormund was about to do. She questioned whether he was truly certain about his decision, warning that even the slightest miscalculation could put Tita in serious danger. Tigr Vormund aimed at Tita, but he had no intention of letting her die. The arrow shot toward her chest, and at that moment all of Tita's clothing was torn apart. Tir na Fa realized that Tigr Vormund had poured an enormous amount of power into the arrow, causing it to break apart before it could strike Tita directly. Tir na Fa acknowledged that Tigr Vormund had passed her test of resolve. Tita regained consciousness and burst into tears in shock at what had happened. Tigr Vormund quickly handed over his cloak so she could cover herself. Tita continued crying uncontrollably as Tir na Fa's castle once again disappeared into the surrounding mist. Afterward, Tigr Vormund mounted his horse and headed toward the battlefield. Tir na Fa's words continued to echo in his mind. She had expressed her anticipation for the new power that Tigr Vormund would develop with his own hands. Meanwhile, the battle was still raging. Ludmila ordered her troops to fire arrows at the enemy forces trapped in the flowing water. Earlier, the Silver Dragon army had constructed a dam using piles of sandbags, redirecting the river toward the battlefield. The strategy had been discussed the previous night. Once the river flowed into the battlefield, the land would turn into a giant trench. Their goal was to lure the enemy into that area and then launch their attack. At the same time, Roland and Eleonora were engaged in battle. Eleonora deliberately moved away, and Roland quickly understood that she intended to draw him away from his troops. He continued chasing her and relentlessly launched attacks. Eleonora then used Verney and leaped high into the air. Roland was convinced that a technique like that would never stop his Durandal. Eleonora rushed forward and unleashed Mutarascu along with Lay Admos, creating a devastating storm of wind that swept everything aside. Roland's body was thrown back by the powerful gusts she created. Even then, Eleonora was unsure whether her attack had been enough to defeat Roland. Roland loudly declared that he was a knight. He drew his sword and effortlessly cut through the swirling winds. Roland admitted that Eleonora's power was terrifying, but her determination was even more frightening. He declared that he would not lose to her and steadily advanced toward Eleonora and Sophia. Eleonora appeared visibly alarmed. Suddenly, an arrow flew toward Roland. He immediately deflected it with his sword. Roland was astonished that Tigr Vormund had managed to fire an arrow from such an incredible distance. Eleonora was equally surprised to see Tigr Vormund arrive. Once Tigr Vormund reached them, Roland questioned his decision to bring Jicted's army into Brunn to protect Alsace. Tigr Vormund openly admitted that Eleonora and the Jicted forces were working under his command to defend Alsace. Eleonora emphasized that their true enemy was the noble Thénardier. Their goal was to make Thénardier answer for his wrongdoing. Once she received the compensation she had been promised, she and her army would return to their homeland. Eleonora then asked Roland whether he would join them and fight by their side. Roland refused the offer. He explained that he and the Navarre forces would only obey the commands of His Majesty the King. Because of that, he could not ignore someone considered a rebel like Tigr Vormund. Roland then raised his sword with both hands, preparing to unleash the full extent of his power. At that moment, Tigr Vormund was struck by intense pain from his injuries. Eleonora stopped him, unwilling to let him throw his life away. She insisted that he still had to survive. Just then, Roland charged directly toward Tigr Vormund. Tigr Vormund drew his bow and declared that he would protect his people. He released an arrow from his black bow. Roland proclaimed himself a knight entrusted with a sacred heirloom by His Majesty the King. He swung his sword to destroy the arrow fired by Tigr Vormund. The clash of their powers was overwhelming. The force released by Roland was so immense that it affected the surrounding area. Eleonora could hardly believe that Roland was still standing after releasing such tremendous power. However, Roland suddenly admitted defeat, explaining that he could no longer move his arms. Not long afterward, Tigr Vormund lost consciousness. The Navarre army had lost half of its forces, and the battle finally came to an end when Roland surrendered. The Silver Dragon army moved ever closer to its inevitable confrontation with Thénardier. During that time, Eleonora remained by Tigr Vormund's side, carefully watching over him while he lay unconscious. That day, the battle between the Silver Dragon army and the Navarre forces finally came to an end. The soldiers began clearing away the weapons and equipment scattered across the battlefield. During that time, Rurik noticed Olivier and Roland signing an agreement. According to Roland, with the battle now concluded, the western side of the land would be designated as a burial site for the Navarre Order, while the eastern side would become the resting place of the fallen Silver Dragon soldiers. Olivier also allowed Tigr Vormund to make use of any equipment that the Navarre forces chose not to retrieve. He pointed out that Navarre armor was extremely valuable, and Roland assured him that it would be put to good use. Roland then asked whether Olivier had any intention of joining forces with the Silver Dragon army. However, Olivier explained that he and his troops could not continue leaving the western border unguarded. Because of that responsibility, they needed to return immediately. Before departing, Olivier expressed his hope that the Silver Dragon army would be blessed with victory. Afterward, Roland informed Tigre Vormund and the others that he would do his best to arrange a meeting with His Majesty, the King. He intended to personally speak with the king and organize an audience between Tigre Vormund and the royal court. Tigre Vormund felt that such an attempt would be too risky, especially after what had nearly happened to Mashes during a similar effort. Roland, however, believed it was his duty as a knight to make up for his previous mistakes. At that moment, Sophia asked Limalicia why Eleonora had not arrived yet. Limalicia explained that a messenger from Regnitz had unexpectedly come to see Eleonora. Soon afterward, Roland departed to meet the King of Brunn. Meanwhile, Eleonora informed Tigre Vormund that she needed to return to Jicted for a while. She explained that she had a close friend whom she greatly admired, a war maiden named Alexandra. Everyone usually called her Sasha. Regnitz, Alexandra's territory, was currently under attack by another war maiden, and Eleonora felt obligated to help protect her. Eleonora explained that she and Alexandra had once promised to come to each other's aid whenever one of them faced danger. She also revealed that Alexandra had been suffering from a serious illness. When Eleonora visited her during the previous summer, Alexandra had already lost the ability to walk on her own. Despite her condition, Alexandra's dragonic tool had never left her side. Tigre Vormund understood the situation completely and assured Eleonora that he would manage the army during her absence. Grateful for his support, Eleonora thanked him and promptly set off on her journey. Meanwhile, Roland traveled alone to the palace in Nice. Upon arriving, he spoke with the palace guards and explained that he needed to discuss an important matter with His Majesty. Before long, he was escorted into a room. However, the door was suddenly closed behind him, leaving him trapped inside. Not long afterward, Maximilien Benusa announced that Roland was unworthy of meeting the king after failing to eliminate a rebel threat. Maximilien harshly criticized Roland, claiming that he had failed to carry out the orders entrusted to him. Soon after, Maximilien released a swarm of bees into the room. He boasted that 1,000 bees could easily bring down a lion. The swarm had been released with the intention of punishing Roland. As the situation unfolded, Roland recalled the words His Majesty had once spoken to him, encouraging him to become a knight among knights. On the same day, Eleonora, Limalicia, and their troops began their march toward Regnitz. Meanwhile, Sophia also said her farewell to Tigre Vormund. She urged him not to act recklessly and promised to return as soon as possible. After Sophia left, Rurik playfully teased Tigre Vormund for watching a woman depart with a smile on his face. Tigre Vormund then asked why Rurik had not returned home with the others. Rurik explained that winter in Brunn was much warmer than in his homeland. Ever since losing his hair, he had become especially sensitive to the cold. He also mentioned that around 1,000 soldiers had accompanied Eleonora, while many of the soldiers who admired Tigre Vormund had chosen to remain behind. Rurik hoped Tigre Vormund would make good use of their loyalty and abilities. Not long afterward, Mashes brought shocking news that Roland had lost his life following a royal punishment. Elsewhere, Felix Aaron confronted Maximilien Benusa over Roland's death. Maximilien acknowledged Roland's strength and stated that Roland had faced his final moments with dignity. Felix then raised concerns about the western border, believing that Sachstein and Asvar would surely take advantage of the situation. Maximilien, however, argued that Felix should be more concerned about the southern border. Reports indicated that Muozinellan forces were already approaching by both sea and land routes. He even questioned whether Felix's territory was prepared for what might come next. Felix was deeply frustrated by Maximilien's remarks. The kingdom of Muozinellan was the nation located closest to Brunn. It was infamous for maintaining one of the harshest systems of slavery in the world. The kingdom had a long history of seizing territories and exploiting vulnerable regions whenever opportunities arose. Throughout the years, it had repeatedly been associated with destructive campaigns and widespread acts of oppression. Their targets often changed according to circumstances, and at that moment, Brunn appeared to be an ideal target for their ambitions. The Muozinellan force approaching numbered 20,000 soldiers. To face them, Thénardier organized his army and marched south with 7,000 troops. The Thénardier forces intended to lure the enemy deeper into their territory before eliminating them. Around 13,000 Thénardier soldiers remained on standby to protect the capital and monitor the movements of Ganelon, who held command of the northern forces. Felix Aaron of Thénardier already understood Ganelon's movements and was curious about what Tigre Vormund would do next. At that time, Tigre Vormund was still thinking about how to deal with an enemy force of 20,000. He would probably remain safe if he stayed in the camp. But he remembered Roland's message when Roland entrusted Durandal to him. Durandal was regarded as proof that Roland acknowledged the justice and ideals that Tigre Vormund believed in. Not long afterward, Tita came to see him. Tigre Vormund was surprised that Tita had come so late at night, but she pointed out that it was already close to dawn. Tita was convinced that Tigr Vormud had not slept all night. Tigr Vormud then ate the breakfast that Tita had brought for him. She reminded him to get enough rest because he was serving as the commander. Tigr Vormud informed her that they would have to part ways again. He asked Tita to remain in the camp with Bertrand. Concern appeared on Tita's face as she asked whether Tigr Vormud would return safely. In response, Tigr Vormud promised that he would come back soon. Later that day, Rurik asked whether Tigr Vormud was confident of victory, but Tigr Vormud himself could not be certain. Rurik suggested that Tigr Vormud should at least appear confident in order to inspire the soldiers. At the time, Tigr Vormud only had 2,000 troops with him, while the enemy numbered 20,000. Because of that overwhelming difference, few people would believe any claim that their army was guaranteed to win. Tigr Vormud met with Hughes and explained that he intended to lead his forces toward the southern border. Hughes questioned why Tigr Vormud did not simply strengthen Territor's defenses. According to Tigr Vormud, even reinforced defenses would struggle against an enemy army of 20,000 soldiers. Hughes argued that they only needed to hold out until knights and reinforcements from other nobles arrived. Furthermore, there was no guarantee that the enemy would actually advance into Territor. Unfortunately, the worst-case scenario was that those reinforcements might never arrive, especially since Tigr Vormud had already been branded a rebel. Tigr Vormud then departed with 1,700 soldiers to address the crisis facing the nation. Tita prayed for Tigr Vormud and his troops to return safely. As Tigr Vormud and his companions advanced, they witnessed firsthand the suffering of the hostages held by the Muozanellan forces. In Tigr Vormud's view, launching a direct attack was not an option. He needed to rescue as many hostages as possible. Tigr Vormud wanted to use his bow, but he still hesitated because he was unsure whether he could fully control the power within it. He decided to launch an attack on the Muozanellan army the following day. For the moment, he and his companions focused only on observing the enemy forces. Rurik then asked Tigr Vormud what he thought of Gerard Hughes' son. Tigr Vormud considered Gerard to be a capable and resourceful person. In fact, he felt grateful for Gerard's actions during the battle against Roland. Rurik admitted that he did not like Gerard because he believed Gerard had a talent for manipulating others. Not long afterward, Tigr Vormud noticed a young girl who had fallen and was surrounded by enemy soldiers. Using his bow, he swiftly drove away the attackers and secured the area. He then approached the girl and checked on her condition. She appeared frightened at first, but after Tigr Vormud introduced himself, she smiled. A moment later, the girl lost consciousness, and Tigr Vormud immediately helped her. That night, Tigr Vormud held a meeting with Rurik and Gerard. They discussed the shortage of supplies needed to sustain a prolonged military campaign. Gerard also raised concerns about the Muozanellan army forcing prisoners into labor and placing captives in dangerous situations during military operations. The following day, Kashim, a general of the Muozanellan army, received a report that approximately 200 Brune soldiers had attacked their left flank using arrows and stones. In response, Kashim ordered one of his subordinates to dispatch 3,000 troops to deal with the Brune force. He was convinced that the group of 200 soldiers was merely a decoy and instructed his men to locate the main Brune army. By order of General Kashim, 3,000 Muozanellan soldiers, consisting of 1,000 archers and 2,000 spearmen, were deployed. They pursued the retreating Brune forces. The Brune soldiers deliberately led them into a fairly narrow mountain pass. As soon as they arrived at the pass, the Muozanellan troops spotted the main force of around 5,000 to 6,000 soldiers. At that moment, Tigr Vormud ordered his army to launch an attack on the Muozanellan troops. The Muozanellan soldiers had no room to retreat and could not escape the battle. As a result, the first clash proceeded without any major complications. Rurik then instructed everyone to gather every usable weapon left on the battlefield. Tigr Vormud continued launching one strategy after another. His goal was to gradually wear down the Muozanellan forces and reduce their numbers. After repeating his surprise attack several times, Tigr Vormud succeeded in reducing the enemy force from 20,000 soldiers to 18,000. However, Kashim responded by using hostages as bait to lure the Brune army out of hiding. After carrying out his plan, the Muozanellan forces dispatched 3,000 soldiers to attack and pin down the enemy while the main force remained behind. Kashim felt confident because he greatly outnumbered Tigr Vormud's army. He was certain that Tigr Vormud's forces could not defeat him. At that time, the Silver Dragon Knights were prepared for battle. Though they numbered only 600 soldiers, Kashim could hardly believe that an archer like Tigr Vormud was actually the commander of the Brune army. He was convinced that the force standing before him was merely a decoy. Tigr Vormud demanded that the Muozanellan army put an end to its cruelty. Just as the battle was about to begin, reinforcements suddenly arrived. The Muozanellan soldiers were shocked to discover that the reinforcements came from Jiktid. Once the battle started, both armies immediately clashed. Even then, Kashim remained convinced that the enemy's tactics were nothing more than cheap tricks that could never defeat his forces. Without hesitation, Tigr Vormud released an arrow toward Kashim. Kashim considered the attempt absurd because the distance between them was more than 300 alsans. However, to everyone's surprise, the arrow flew straight toward its target and struck Kashim in the head, causing him to collapse instantly. The moment the Muozinellan soldiers learned that their commander had fallen, they immediately fled the battlefield. Tigr Vormud ordered his troops not to allow a single enemy soldier to escape. Rurik could hardly believe how smoothly the battle had gone. According to Tigr Vormud, their success was largely due to the enemy's carelessness. That was why the Muozinellan army had positioned its main force at the front. Rurik was certain that the Muozinellan soldiers had never imagined that a Brune archer could accurately hit a target from over 300 alsans away. After the battle, one of the former hostages angrily confronted Tigr Vormud for not revealing himself sooner, believing that it might have prevented some of the hostage casualties. Tigr Vormud sincerely apologized. All of the captives were then released. A young girl thanked Tigr Vormud for saving the townspeople and for avenging her father. Although she understood the concerns expressed by the former hostage, she still wanted to express her gratitude. Tigr Vormud humbly thanked her in return. Jared witnessed just how humble Tigr Vormud truly was. During the campaign, the Muozinellan army lost a total of 5,000 soldiers, while nearly a quarter of their forces fell into the Agnes ravine. That night, Tigr Vormud and the others rested. Jared reported that 1,503 soldiers had survived, while 462 had been wounded. The 2,000 rescued hostages would be escorted to Territor. Not long afterward, Rurik arrived and called everyone to a meeting. He revealed that the Muozinellan army they had fought was merely an advance force. He had obtained this information from one of the Muozinellan prisoners. The enemy's main army was estimated to number around 30,000 soldiers. If the troops who had escaped earlier rejoined them, their total strength could reach 40,000. Tigr Vormud believed that the enemy forces would be exhausted after enduring repeated attacks. The following day, Tigr Vormud and his soldiers escorted the civilians toward Territor. At the same time, another Muozinellan force of roughly 3,000 to 4,000 soldiers was advancing in their direction. Rurik believed that the enemy's strategy appeared far more organized than before. Tigr Vormud instructed Rurik to oversee the civilian convoy while he and a portion of the archers moved ahead to confront the Muozinellan army. Tigr Vormud felt fortunate that they still had enough open space to make effective use of their bows. Tigr Vormud and the archers unleashed a volley of arrows, but the attack failed to slow the Muozinellan advance. Suddenly, additional enemy reinforcements appeared. They were led by the ruler of Olmutz, the Snow Princess and mistress of the icy storms, Ludmila. Upon arriving on the battlefield, Ludmila greeted Tigr Vormud with a smile. One day in the past, Ludmila and Eleonora were about to face off against each other when Alexandra suddenly arrived and asked what they were doing. Naturally, both Eleonora and Ludmila immediately blamed one another. Alexandra then offered to become their opponent. She challenged them to attack her together. If either of them could land even a small scratch on her, she would grant whatever they wished for an entire day. However, if they failed, they would have to make peace with each other. Upon hearing the challenge, Eleonora and Ludmila immediately rushed toward Alexandra. However, both of them were swiftly defeated by her. Alexandra advised them to strengthen their resolve when using their dragonic vessels and to use those powers to help others rather than fight over trivial matters. Afterward, she instructed them to reconcile. With no other choice, Eleonora and Ludmila shook hands. On that day, Eleonora and Limalicia paid a visit to Alexandra. Alexandra welcomed them with a smile. Eleonora asked who had dared to step into Alexandra's territory. Alexandra explained that it was Elizaveta, the Thunderstorm Princess. Eleonora then asked why Elizaveta had mobilized her forces. Alexandra began recounting the events. During midsummer, she and Elizaveta had been working together on a mission to drive pirates away from their waters. Alexandra admitted that she had tried not to provoke Elizaveta when Elizaveta became dissatisfied with her. Elizaveta insisted that Alexandra's troops had allowed the pirates to escape and later attack Elizaveta's forces directly. Alexandra had reviewed the reports herself and could not fully agree with that conclusion. Their alliance eventually came to an end when autumn arrived. Eleonora was disappointed by Elizaveta's impatience. Alexandra hoped that Elizaveta's troops would stop recognizing her as a war maiden and leave her alone, so that Alexandra would not have to trouble Eleonora any further. However, since the dragonic vessel itself chose the war maidens, Alexandra once again found herself relying on Eleonora's help. Eleonora told Alexandra not to worry because she was confident everything would work out. She vowed to drive Elizaveta out of Legnica and make her acknowledge Alexandra's position. Alexandra then mentioned that she had heard Eleonora and Limalicia had been involved in something interesting. She had learned about it from a letter written by Sophia. Eleonora admitted that she had met an awkward young man who struggled to handle things on his own. She felt it would be a waste to leave him behind, so she decided to help him. Lai Militia quickly pointed out that more often than not, it was Tigr Vormund who ended up helping Eleonora. In response, Eleonora brought up an incident involving Lai Militia that Tigr Vormund had once helped with. Lai Militia was caught off guard by the remark. Alexandra commented that Eleonora seemed to like Tigr Vormund quite a lot. Eleonora replied that Tigr Vormund was an interesting person and that if Alexandra ever spoke with him, she would surely find him interesting as well. Eleonora even planned to bring Tigr Vormund to meet Alexandra someday and jokingly said she would be willing to let Alexandra spend time with him. Alexandra responded that she would need to stay alive long enough to meet Tigr Vormund herself. Meanwhile, Curies received a report from one of his subordinates who had escaped from the battlefield. The subordinate reported that the enemy forces had been supported by troops from Jiktid. Curies had already heard rumors that one of Brün's nobles had allied himself with someone from Jiktid. The fact that thousands of soldiers had been deployed made him even more curious about the reason behind it. Curies ordered a messenger to gather more information. He wanted to find out whether the War Maiden was truly as beautiful as people claimed. If the stories proved true, he joked that he might consider offering his support. Otherwise, they would simply return empty-handed. That night, Ludmila went to see Tigr Vormund. She brought up the way he had thanked her previously. According to Ludmila, words of gratitude like that could sometimes encourage people to expect unreasonable favors in return. Tigr Vormund asked why she had come. Ludmila replied that Tigr Vormund surely wanted her assistance since she commanded 4,000 soldiers. She understood the difficult situation he was facing. But in her opinion, Tigr Vormund was asking for too much. She also believed she had identified one of his weaknesses and was reluctant to fight alongside someone she considered overly naive. Tigr Vormund then earnestly appealed to Ludmila. He admitted that he could not promise her any grand reward, but if she was willing to wait until the battle was over, he would certainly find a way to repay her. Ludmila told Tigr Vormund to raise his head. She confessed that she still could not decide whether he was simply innocent or foolish. Even so, despite his flaws, Tigr Vormund had managed to meet her standards. Before that, Ludmila asked Tigr Vormund to reveal the secret behind how he had destroyed the gate of her castle in the Tatra Mountains. She explained that the ancient gate had been constructed with 3 layers of the finest noble steel, with Phonak fibers woven between them. She had been certain that Arafar would never be able to break through it. Ludmila admitted that she trusted Tigr Vormund and wanted him to trust her as well. In response, Tigr Vormund showed her the bow he had used to destroy the castle gate. Ludmila acknowledged that the bow appeared far from extraordinary. Tigr Vormund explained that it was a family heirloom passed down through generations. Ludmila wondered why he did not draw out its power, considering that the bow possessed strength comparable to that of the War Maidens. Tigr Vormund admitted that he still did not fully understand the bow's abilities, and there were times when he could not sense anything unusual from it at all. According to Tigr Vormund, the bow's power only seemed to emerge during critical moments. Ludmila remarked that it sounded as though they could not rely on the bow in the next battle. She then pointed out that if the enemy commander were defeated, they would not need to face all 40,000 enemy soldiers directly, allowing Tigr Vormund to control the flow of the battle more effectively. Ludmila expressed her hope that she would be able to witness the bow's power again someday, calling it a debt that Tigr Vormund still owed her. Afterward, Tigr Vormund had a conversation with Gerard. Gerard admitted that he was curious about who Tigr Vormund really was and why people such as Eleonora and others were willing to help him so readily. Tigr Vormund simply credited it to good fortune. Gerard then asked Tigr Vormund for a favor. He wanted Tigr Vormund to bring food to a young girl they had rescued earlier. Tigr Vormund delivered the meal and stayed to eat with her. The girl asked for some of the soup that Tigr Vormund was having. Her name was Regine. After introducing themselves, Tigr Vormund prepared to leave, but Regine stopped him and asked him for a favor. That night, snow was falling heavily. Elsewhere, a war maiden named Elizaveta was standing watch when one of her subordinates suddenly reported that approximately 3,000 troops were moving south. The force carried 2 banners, one displaying 2 swords on a yellow background and another displaying 2 silver swords on a black background. Elizaveta immediately recognized them as the troops led by Eleonora. The allied forces of Legnica and Leitmeritz, commanded by Eleonora, confronted Elizaveta's Libis army at Boroslo, the northernmost territory of Legnica. Earlier, Alexandra had asked Lai Militia to protect Eleonora. Alexandra understood that the path Eleonora had chosen would not be an easy one. Anyone who opposed Eleonora's decisions could eventually stand against her. If that day came, it would not be a dragonic treasure that protected her, but the people around her. As someone who had spent many years beside Eleonora and had fought alongside her even before she became a war maiden, Alexandra could only entrust that responsibility to Lai Militia. Elizaveta immediately ordered her army to advance and engage the allied forces of Legnica and Leitmeritz. Likewise, Eleonora boldly moved forward to meet the Libis army. She instructed Limelisha to oversee the troops because only a war maiden could properly face another war maiden. The battle unfolded amid the falling snow. Elizaveta admitted that she had missed Eleonora greatly. Eleonora responded by launching lay Admos, but Elizaveta easily avoided the attack and countered with her lightning technique. Eleonora quickly leaped backward. Elizaveta warned her to be careful, noting that attacks associated with Alexandra's power could become dangerous if underestimated. Eleonora replied that the same warning applied equally to Elizaveta. Meanwhile, Limelisha encouraged the soldiers and strengthened their morale. She hoped the battle would end as quickly as possible. At the same time, Eleonora unleashed Verni against Elizaveta. However, Elizaveta's lightning attack was so powerful that it sent Eleonora sliding backward across the battlefield. Eleonora acknowledged the strength of her opponent's attack, but she refused to give up. She immediately launched another lay Admos. Elizaveta answered with her own Gran Lazriga. The two tremendous powers collided and burst apart in midair. Seeing that Eleonora remained standing, Elizaveta initially assumed that the clash had ended in a draw. A moment later, however, she realized that Eleonora's attack had actually forced her backward. Elizaveta then proposed ending the battle. Eleonora still wished to defeat her rival, but Elizaveta reminded her that time was running short. At that very moment, the nobles Thénardier and Ganelon were already preparing to mobilize their armies. Elizaveta added that Ganelon's forces were ready to move, and no one knew which army they would target first. In addition, the Muozanellan forces were currently invading Brünn, and the troops involved were far from insignificant. She asked whether Eleonora truly wanted to continue their contest simply to determine who was stronger. If their duel continued, it would only give the surrounding armies more time to suffer unnecessary losses. Elizaveta proposed an agreement. Both sides would withdraw their troops and calmly discuss the pirate issue that Eleonora had previously learned about. Eleonora agreed to the proposal, but she requested that Elizaveta offer Alexandra a sincere and proper apology. Elizaveta accepted the condition, and so the Battle of Boroslo came to an end. Both armies returned to their respective territories. The soldiers of Legnica expressed their gratitude to Eleonora. As dawn approached, Eleonora and her forces began their journey back to Leitmeritz. On the way home, Eleonora hoped that Tigr Vormund would not act recklessly and would be willing to wait for her return. Meanwhile, Ludmila told Tigr Vormund and Rurik that they would defeat Muozanellan in a single battle. Rurik wondered whether that was even possible. In Ludmila's view, it was not a question of whether they could do it or not. It was something they had to accomplish. She understood that Tigr Vormund was probably exhausted at the time, but she reminded him to stay focused on discussing their strategy. Ludmila was convinced that the Silver Dragon troops would not be able to endure more than one major battle. Tigr Vormund asked whether she had any additional plans. According to Ludmila, just as Tigr Vormund had done before when facing enemies with far greater numbers, they needed to target either the enemy's supplies or its commander first. However, attacking the supplies was impossible at the moment because their forces would likely be overwhelmed before they could even break through the enemy defenses. Rurik asked if that meant it was Tigr Vormund's chance to demonstrate his abilities. Ludmila advised him to be especially careful of the enemy commander. She explained that the commander was Curies, known as Barbaros, the brother of the king of Muozanellan. Tigr Vormund was unfamiliar with that information, and Ludmila found it surprising, wondering whether Eleonora had never taught him about such matters. Ludmila then recounted how Sachstein had once dispatched 1,000 warships to attack Muozanellan. Curies had responded with only 200 ships, yet he returned victorious. The feat had left even Sachstein deeply shaken, and Curies earned the nickname the Red Beard, or Barbarossa in the Sachstein language. Because of that, Tigr Vormund would have to overcome Curies, and Ludmila shared a battle strategy with him. Tigr Vormund believed the plan could help him secure victory, but the risks were extremely high. He asked why Ludmila was helping him so much. Ludmila replied that she was certain Tigr Vormund would repay her support in the best possible way. She also hoped he would impress her with his archery skills, something she had been eagerly looking forward to seeing. Meanwhile, having learned from the fate of the first force previously sent by Muozanellan, the army advanced across Agnes in a large formation. The 40,000 soldiers no longer moved as a single unit. Instead, they were divided into 7 groups that maintained distance from one another. With such a formation, they could respond more effectively to surprise attacks. It was a strategy designed by Curies. That night, the messenger Curies had sent to the Jictid forces returned with a response. The message stated that the Jictid army was present in Brünn because the Kingdom of Brünn had requested assistance in protecting its territory. Unlike Muozanellan's forces, they were not occupying foreign lands for their own gain. The Jictid army had no interest in cooperating with Curies, and they warned that they would respond if he interfered with them. Curies realized that the War Maiden viewed him as someone who had invaded lands at will. He did not deny the accusation because it was true. Even so, he believed the Shtid forces should not have challenged him. One of Ludmila's subordinates then reported that the enemy army had established positions on 2 hills to the west. Approximately 2,000 soldiers were stationed to the north, and it appeared that they had brought along the hostages captured earlier by the advance forces. Curies declared that he could not ignore a direct challenge from the war-maiden Ludmila. Tigr-Vormund remained confident that he could defeat Curies' army. As the day approached noon and snow began to fall, the Battle of Ormia was about to begin. That day, the Muozanellan forces gathered before Curies. One of Curies' subordinates reported that their army had already been anticipated by the enemy. The opposing force was carrying 4 banners, including the banners of Bayard and Zimitra, a crescent moon banner, and a spear banner. The enemy had also prepared barricades across the hills and trenches. In addition, rows of spearmen had been arranged in a formation that resembled a temporary fortress. As the Muozanellan forces advanced, they were met with volleys of arrows and stones. Fortunately, the enemy's attacks were not particularly accurate. The distant hills were covered in heavy snow, making it difficult to detect any signs of enemy activity. Curies ordered his troops to reclaim the slaves who had escaped and take them into custody once again. He was also curious to see how the War Maiden would demonstrate her battlefield strategy. The Battle of Ormia began as the Muozanellan forces launched their offensive. After discovering the location of the enemy's small fortress, the Muozanellan army immediately surrounded the hill with their 1st through 4th divisions. Meanwhile, the 5th through 7th divisions pursued a group of civilians who appeared to be moving away from the battlefield. However, from a hill the Muozanellan forces had not expected, the Silver Dragon Knights and the Olmutz forces suddenly launched an attack. The Muozanellan soldiers immediately released a volley of arrows, but Ludmila quickly used her power to deflect the incoming projectiles. Standing beside her, Tigr-Vormund swiftly fired 3 arrows at once, each one striking its target with remarkable precision. Ludmila and Tigr-Vormund continued pressing forward, engaging the soldiers ahead of them and opening a path through the battlefield. Gerard was responsible for supplying arrows to Tigr-Vormund. Ludmila asked whether Tigr-Vormund felt afraid. Tigr-Vormund replied that if fear ever overcame him, he would be counting on Ludmila to protect him. Meanwhile, Curies had not expected the enemy army to be hiding on a hill his forces had overlooked. He realized once again that Ludmila's reputation as a master of defensive tactics was well deserved. Rurik ordered his troops to attack the enemies pursuing them. At the same time, one of Curies' subordinates informed him that the group believed to be civilians had suddenly organized themselves and launched a coordinated counterattack. Curies merely wondered whether the god of war would favor the hunt for dragons and noble steeds, or whether the battlefield would bring unexpected challenges. The 2,000 civilians Curies had intended to capture were actually Silver Dragon and Olmutz soldiers in disguise. Following the preparations made by the group led by Tigr-Vormund, they launched an attack on Muozanellan's 5th Division. The real civilians, meanwhile, were safely sheltering within the fortress atop the hill. The previous night, the civilians had asked Tigr-Vormund what he wanted from them, since they believed they had already lost everything. Tigr-Vormund hoped they would first listen to his plan, as it was something he wished to do in order to protect even more people. Suddenly, one of the civilians declared that he would follow Tigr-Vormund. He understood that the civilians could not fight. If they recklessly challenged the enemy on their own, they would stand little chance of survival. However, by following Tigr-Vormund's commands, they would at least have hope. Tigr-Vormund promised that he would protect them all with every effort he could make. Before long, Muozanellan's 5th Division was completely defeated by Tigr-Vormund and his forces. They then moved on to attack the 6th Division. Upon learning this, Curies ordered the 1st through 3rd Divisions to tighten their encirclement around the hill, while the 4th Division was pulled back to strengthen the defensive line. Curies intended to keep surrounding the enemy, forcing them to fight until exhaustion gradually wore them down. Ludmila and Tigr-Vormund then charged toward Muozanellan's 7th Division, where Curies himself was stationed. The Silver Dragon Knights and the Olmutz forces advanced toward the 7th Division with the goal of preventing the enemy from retreating. At that moment, Muozanellan's 6th Division changed direction and moved back to intercept them. Seeing the situation unfold, Tigr-Vormund called for supporting forces to create an opening that would give him a clear opportunity to take aim. Unfortunately, the available reinforcements had already reached their limit. The 6th Division continued closing in on the forces led by Tigr-Vormund and Ludmila. Ludmila regretted the situation deeply, as victory had seemed only a single step away. Curies simply laughed and acknowledged Ludmila's impressive abilities. He admitted that he had never expected Tigr-Vormund and Ludmila to advance so aggressively toward his position. Had they managed to push forward just a little farther, Curies believed his situation could have become extremely dangerous. Curies then ordered the 6th and 7th Divisions to spread out and surround the Silver Dragon forces. He also instructed them to increase their distance from the fighting until they were positioned far beyond the effective range of Tigr-Vormund's arrows. Curies had not expected Tigr Vormud to boldly bring Jiktid's forces and a war maiden to pressure him in battle. Even so, Curies remained confident that his army could hold its ground against them. At that moment, Tigr Vormud had run out of arrows, and Gerard provided him with more. Seeing that the enemy forces seemed endless, Tigr Vormud asked Ludmila to fall back. However, Ludmila refused because she still carried her own pride, as well as the pride of her mother and grandmother. She also wanted to uphold the honor of the war maidens who had once ruled Lavias. Tigr Vormud replied that if Ludmila had her pride, then he had his determination, a determination given to him by his father and by the people around him. Because of that, he would continue fighting no matter what. Ludmila then asked Tigr Vormud to fight alongside her, promising that she would protect him from behind. Before long, a group of reinforcements arrived. They were knights who had come from the north. Their leader was searching for Tigr Vormud. His name was Emiele. Emiele had arrived in the name of Mashas, bringing 1,500 knights from Perch. He requested permission to join the battle under Tigr Vormud's command. Not long afterward, Shai also arrived with 1,500 knights from Lutece. He had come under Hugh's orders, and both Shai and his troops were willing to serve under Tigr Vormud's command. In addition, Auguste of the Calvados Knights arrived with 2,000 of his own men and declared that they would fight alongside Tigr Vormud. Tigr Vormud was surprised that Auguste had come to support him. Soon after, Emiele's and Auguste's forces moved quickly to eliminate the remaining Muozinellan soldiers still standing on the battlefield. Auguste asked whether Tigr Vormud still remembered him. Auguste had once served the Vorn family. He admitted that he had felt helpless because there had been little he could do, but Roland and Olivier of Navarre had sent him letters about Tigr Vormud. Tigr Vormud was surprised to learn that Roland had been the one who informed Auguste about him. In his letter, Roland wrote that Tigr Vormud was fighting for Brune and his people. Simply reading those words had made Auguste want to help him, and later Mashas personally spoke to him about the matter as well. Auguste said that Tigr Vormud had grown into a true man, just like his late father, Urs. After saying that, Auguste immediately returned to the battlefield. Ludmila admitted that she felt relieved to see the reinforcements arrive. She then asked whether Tigr Vormud intended to withdraw for the time being. Tigr Vormud refused, saying that he was still capable of drawing his bow. Not long afterward, Gerard brought him another supply of arrows. Meanwhile, news that 5,000 knights had arrived to support Tigr Vormud reached Curies. His subordinates began to grow anxious, but Curies remained calm. He was confident that his 4th army would defeat the enemy reinforcements. He ordered the 6th army to remain focused on the battle at hand. The fighting continued to intensify. Curies still could not understand how Tigr Vormud had managed to gather such powerful reinforcements. At that time, Tigr Vormud and Ludmila continued fighting on the front lines. Curies believed that Tigr Vormud and his forces would eventually become exhausted. Once that happened, the Muozinellan army would be able to overwhelm them along with the knights supporting them. Before long, another force of 3,000 soldiers appeared and began approaching the battlefield. The 6th army was soon caught off guard by the new arrivals, and it seemed that the enemy forces had begun to seize the momentum of the battle. Curies was puzzled. His scouts had carried out their duties well, yet such an unexpected development had still occurred. He wondered if this was what people referred to as the power of a war maiden, the ability to consistently bring victory wherever she fought. Curies reminded his subordinates that the battle was not over. Their objective remained the same, to conquer Brune's southern border. He then ordered all of his forces to withdraw and regroup. The battle had claimed approximately 6,000 lives. That night, Curies carefully considered what strategy he should adopt next. He had lost nearly 30% of both his vanguard troops and his main army. He was still waiting for information from the scouts he had dispatched. Not long afterward, one of his informants arrived with troubling news. The force sent to conquer the southern Strait of Brune had been completely defeated by Thénardier's army. As a result, the remaining 30,000 Muozinellan troops would have to defeat the enemy standing before them and deal with Thénardier's forces before they could achieve their objective. Faced with these circumstances, Curies decided to retreat. He did not want to waste his soldiers in a costly and uncertain campaign. He concluded that he needed to learn more about the opposing commander, Tigr Vormud. Curies openly acknowledged that he had developed great respect and admiration for him. The messenger delivered a message to Tigr Vormud, saying that Curies and his troops had been deeply moved by the battle Tigr Vormud had fought to protect the territory. In addition, Curies praised Tigr Vormud's extraordinary archery skills. As a result, Tigr Vormud was awarded the title of Silvrash, which meant someone capable of shooting an arrow toward the stars. The battle ended with a victory for the Silver Dragon forces. After hearing the message, Tigr Vormud could hardly believe that they had won, while Ludmila was convinced that it was not a trap. Suddenly, Tigr Vormud's body gave out from exhaustion. Ludmila was startled by his condition. She realized that he had endured a long and difficult battle and had shown tremendous determination throughout the ordeal. Ludmila remarked on how remarkable Tigr Vormud was. She stayed close to him as he rested, and before long, both of them fell asleep. Not long afterward, Gerard came to Tigr Vormud's tent to discuss their next plan. However, he found Tigr Vormud and Ludmila resting peacefully inside the tent. Gerard simply smiled and quietly left. The following morning, Ludmila woke up after hearing someone approaching the tent. Suddenly, Eleonora arrived and called out to Tigr Vormud, but she was surprised to find Ludmila resting beside him. Shortly afterward, Limelisha also arrived at the tent. That morning, the people at the refugee camp were having breakfast together. At the time, Rurik and Gerard were arguing about the calculation of their remaining supplies. Bertrand asked Tita to visit Tigr Vormud, but she declined because she had already greeted him. Besides, she was certain that Tigr Vormud was busy meeting all the people who had come to see him. At that moment, Tita only wanted to do something useful by helping distribute food. She never expected Tigr Vormud to save so many people. Bertrand commented that Tigr Vormud had truly matured. Meanwhile, Limelisha asked Mashes what she should do to make up for her departure during the previous battle. Mashes told her not to dwell on it because the circumstances had been unavoidable. According to Hughes, the most important outcome of everything that had happened was that Tigr Vormud had earned widespread praise for his victory. He noted that both Tigr Vormud and Roland had lived by the teachings left behind by those who had passed away, allowing them to reach such impressive heights. Hughes admitted that he himself was not yet capable of doing the same. Limelisha confessed that she had initially thought Tigr Vormud was merely a reckless man blessed with good luck. However, by then, he had become someone with considerable influence in Brünn. Mashes wondered what Tigr Vormud would choose to do next. Later that day, in front of Eleonora, Ludmila deliberately invited Tigr Vormud to her tent, saying that she would prepare a refreshing tea to help him recover from his fatigue. Eleonora was clearly unhappy to see how familiar Ludmila had become with Tigr Vormud. She even pulled Tigr Vormud aside, explaining that she needed to discuss something important with him. Ludmila tried to stop her and pointed out that Eleonora had not been by Tigr Vormud's side when he needed support the most. The two women then exchanged sharp remarks and criticized one another. Before long, Ludmila was called away to manage the supplies. She looked annoyed but said that she would head there immediately. Tigr Vormud thanked Ludmila for the invitation and told her that he would gladly ask for her help again in the future. Ludmila smiled and promptly left. That night, Eleonora and Tigr Vormud gazed at the beautiful night sky together. Eleonora wondered why Tigr Vormud had been so easily affected by Ludmila's playful charm, to the point that he seemed completely distracted. She pointed out that Ludmila had stood beside Tigr Vormud and fought against Muozinelen. Eleonora admitted that Tigr Vormud was a man who continually impressed her. Tigr Vormud apologized for the many soldiers from Eleonora's army who had fallen during the battle. Eleonora smiled and invited him to lie down beside her as they looked up at the night sky. She gently held Tigr Vormud's hand and asked whether he regretted any of the battles he had fought up to that moment. Eleonora then suggested that they offer a prayer for those who had lost their lives. Tigr Vormud agreed, and Eleonora thanked him. Their eyes met as they sat together, their hands still joined. The atmosphere that night was warm, heartfelt, and filled with a quiet sense of affection. The camp itself was peaceful and silent, as everyone had already retired to their tents for the night. One morning, while Tigr Vormud was still asleep in his room, Valentina suddenly appeared out of nowhere. She was about to reach out to him, but while still asleep, Tigr Vormud accidentally grabbed her chest, startling her. Half awake, he mistook what he had touched for a pillow and simply went back to sleep. Valentina was extremely irritated by his lack of manners. Hearing someone approaching Tigr Vormud's room, she disappeared once again and decided to return another day. Not long afterward, Tita's voice could be heard as she came to wake Tigr Vormud up. Tigr Vormud and the Silver Dragon troops had successfully defeated the Muozinelen forces and secured a cooperative alliance with the Knight Emile of Perche. They took shelter within the protection of Perche Fortress, located about 4 days away from the Ormia mainland. As usual, Ludmila and Eleonora continued exchanging sarcastic remarks. Ludmila commented that Eleonora should never have returned from Jiktid. Eleonora said she appreciated the concern, but she had complete confidence in the strength of her subordinates. She teased Ludmila by suggesting that perhaps Ludmila was the one who missed her homeland. Ludmila replied that such concern was rather generous coming from someone who had not been present when the battle reached its most critical point. Eleonora acknowledged that and thanked Ludmila for arriving at the right moment. However, since she had already returned, she jokingly claimed that Ludmila's role was finished and suggested that Ludmila head back to Olmutz. Ludmila revealed that Jiktid had assigned her to monitor Eleonora's actions. Besides that, Tigr Vormud still owed her a debt. Hearing that only made Eleonora even more annoyed. That morning, Tigr Vormud could be seen moving his fingers while trying to remember what he had touched earlier. Limelisha found his behavior rather strange. Mashas assumed Tigr Vormud was simply exhausted. According to Mashas, the more victories a person achieved, the more responsibilities followed, especially for someone leading an army. Tigr Vormud asked why they were holding a meeting so early in the morning. Mashas explained that they needed to discuss a matter concerning His Highness the Prince. Tigr Vormud was confused and pointed out that the prince had supposedly died during the battle on the Dinant mainland. Mashas replied that among the refugees there was someone who looked remarkably similar to the prince, and he wondered whether Tigr Vormud knew that person's identity. Not long afterward, Bertrand arrived and informed them that a young woman named Regine insisted on meeting Tigr Vormud. As soon as Regine entered the room, Mashas was stunned because her face closely resembled that of His Highness the Prince. Regine explained that she wanted to discuss something important with Tigr Vormud. He invited her to speak freely in front of everyone present. Regine revealed that she had lived under the name Regnes, or more precisely, Regnes Estelle War Bastien de Charles. Everyone in the room was shocked. La Militia immediately asked whether Regine had any proof to support her claim. Regine then asked Tigr Vormud whether he remembered an incident in Vincennes 6 years earlier. At that time, the prince had slipped away from a hunting tournament and happened to meet Tigr Vormud, who had also left the event. Tigr Vormud had managed to catch some game, and the two of them shared the meal together. It had been the first time the prince tasted freshly grilled meat. Hearing those details, Tigr Vormud remembered the event clearly. He asked whether Regine truly was the prince. The revelation shocked Mashas so much that he briefly lost consciousness. When Mashas recovered, Tita asked whether he was feeling all right. Upon learning that Regnes was actually alive, Ludmila questioned whether Eleonora had not supposedly killed him during the war on the Dinant mainland. Eleonora admitted that she had never believed she was responsible for such a thing. Tigr Vormud asked everyone to trust Regine just as he trusted Eleonora. Regine explained that she had been attacked by someone during the battle. Eleonora then asked why Regine had spent so many years pretending to be a man. Regine answered that she had done so for the sake of both her mother and herself. In Brune, a queen who could only produce daughters would often face criticism. Furthermore, many people would consider it unusual for a queen to inherit the royal throne. That was why Regine had taken the bold step of assuming the identity of a prince. Ludmila remarked that Regine had made an incredibly courageous choice. Eleonora agreed that it had worked for the time being, though she jokingly wondered how long the disguise could have lasted as Regine matured. Eleonora then asked for Tigr Vormud's opinion. Ludmila believed that Regine might only become a burden to them. Eleonora explained that they could announce that the prince was still alive, but nobles such as Thénardier and Ganelon were determined to eliminate him. If the people later discovered that the prince was actually a woman, they might feel deceived, and Tigr Vormud's group could easily fall into their enemy's trap. Tigr Vormud understood the concern. He asked whether it would be possible to meet His Majesty the King. Mashas replied that the king was currently in a deeply troubled state of mind. Regine was visibly surprised to hear that. Tigr Vormud then asked why Regine had chosen to reveal the truth to him and place her trust in him. Regine explained that it was because Tigr Vormud had never shown any hidden agenda. Even after being branded a rebel, he had continued helping ordinary people. He had also treated Regine kindly and fulfilled one of her personal requests. Curious, Eleonora asked what kind of request Regine meant. Blushing, Regine explained that some time ago she had asked Tigr Vormud to help her while she was feeling unwell and needed assistance. She had made that request after they shared dinner together in a tent. Eleonora was surprised that Regine had trusted someone she barely knew to such an extent. She commented that placing such trust in another person could have led to serious problems if that trust had been misplaced. Eleonora asked whether Regine intended to leave without addressing the matter. Regine realized that she had been acting cowardly, but at that moment, she could not think of any other option. Tigr Vormud then asked whether she could prove that she truly was the noble prince of Brune. In response, Regine brought up Lutetia, the capital of Artesium. Beneath it was a locked door that could only be opened by members of the royal family, a fact that was also known to Pierre, the prime minister. After hearing that, Tigr Vormud immediately decided to take Regine to Artesium. Meanwhile, Felix Aaron was preparing the dragons to defeat Tigr Vormud and the War Maidens. The chains attached to the dragons were designed to allow them to neutralize the powers of the War Maidens. Elsewhere, Maximilien Benusa of Ganelon was considering how to deal with the current situation. He knew about Thénardier's dragons, which had thrown his soldiers into disarray. In addition, the Black Bough had been discovered. Roland, the wielder of Durandal, had lost his life and the king's condition was steadily improving. He had also learned that Tigr Vormud was heading to Artesium to verify Regine's claim. Maximilien Benusa was convinced that Felix Aaron would attempt to stop Tigr Vormud. He planned to prepare a final surprise for whoever arrived in Artesium first, and he intended to arrange it from beneath the city. At that time, Ganelon's forces had been wiped out after being overwhelmed by Thénardier's dragons. At the same time, Felix Aaron received information from Steed regarding Tigr Vormud's and Raid Keen's army moving toward Artesium. Felix Aaron intended to eliminate both Raid Keen and Tigr Vormud from the conflict. Meanwhile, King Victor sent Sofia to instruct Eleonora to withdraw from the war. He specifically chose Sofia because she had previously visited Brünn. Sofia accepted the order and departed immediately. She had not expected that King Victor had already begun considering a way to bring the war to an end. Not long afterward, Sofia encountered Valentina. It had been a very long time since the two had seen each other. Sofia wondered why Valentina had come. Valentina explained that being confined within her own territory had left her eager for information, while the capital had become so crowded that it exhausted her. Shortly afterward, Valentina left and continued on her way. That day, Artesium was engulfed in flames and people rushed to find safety. It turned out that Maximilian Benusa had deliberately set fire to his own territory before disappearing. Meanwhile, Felix Aaron moved north after defeating Ganelon's forces. Even so, Tigr Vormud's objective remained unchanged, and he continued his urgent march toward Artesium, determined to obtain solid proof regarding Raid Keen's identity. The Silver Dragon forces advanced toward the capital. They eventually encountered Thénardier's army on the plains of Villacrescence. At that time, the Silver Dragon army numbered 20,000 soldiers, while Thénardier's army consisted of 24,000. The battle soon began. As the two main forces clashed, Eleonora and Ludmila worked together to strike Thénardier's left flank and move closer to the dragons. Eleonora used the power of Ley Admos, while Ludmila unleashed Cielo Zincafa. Those abilities were intended to freeze and shatter the dragons, but unfortunately the attacks seemed ineffective. From a distance, Felix Aaron carefully observed the battle. While the two war maidens were occupied with the dragons, he planned to seize the opportunity to surround Tigr Vormud and Raid Keen with 6,000 soldiers. Eleonora leaped into the air and attacked a dragon using the power of Ley Admos, but the strike once again had little effect. She then drew her arrow full, yet the dragon's scales were so tough that the weapon could not break through them. Next, Ludmila used Cielo Zamkafa in an attempt to freeze the dragon, but her attack could not penetrate the creature's protective barrier. The dragon then unleashed a stream of fire toward Ludmila. Reacting quickly, Eleonora pulled her companion away from danger. As a result, Eleonora suffered burns on her back, and Ludmila immediately used her powers to cool the injury. The dragon launched another burst of fire toward them. Fortunately, Ludmila quickly created a wall of ice that shielded them from harm. Meanwhile, Tigr Vormud encouraged his soldiers to continue standing firm against the enemy before them. He repeatedly fired arrows toward opposing forces, while Rurik struggled to defend himself against enemy attacks. When the sun reached its highest point, both armies agreed to pause and temporarily withdraw from the battlefield. Tigr Vormud then held a meeting with his allies. Eleonora explained that the chains attached to the dragons had likely been created to neutralize the dragonic magic used by the War Maidens. Just as Roland's Durandal possessed special properties, she believed that there must be a type of steel in the world capable of resisting dragon magic. Although the dragons could repel dragonic spells and were formidable opponents, Eleonora insisted that they were not enemies beyond the abilities of herself and Ludmila. Because of that, Eleonora and Ludmila resolved to continue confronting the dragons, while Tigr Vormud focused on dealing with Thénardier's army. Tigr Vormud's face showed clear concern, but Ludmila reassured him that there was no need to worry about the two of them. She firmly believed that dragons could be overcome by war maidens such as herself and Eleonora. Afterward, both women quickly returned to the battlefield. Limelisha then reported the current situation to Tigr Vormud. Meanwhile, Steed had doubts about the enemy's main force, noticing that many of them were not fully equipped in uniform. He also told Felix Aaron that the Silver Dragon army's main force appeared to be nothing more than a decoy because he was convinced that the Silver Dragon troops would not simply run out of weapons. It seemed that the Silver Dragon army intended to engage in close-range combat, which would create more distance between the battlefield and the dragons. Felix Aaron instructed his troops to stay with the original plan. Soon after, the battle resumed. Tigr Vormud ordered the Silver Dragon army's main force to withdraw. Following that, Eleonora and Ludmila prepared to move forward and confront the dragons. Both of them hoped that Tigr Vormud and his troops would succeed in their mission. They quickly got ready to face the dragons that were steadily approaching. It turned out that the main force had withdrawn in order to put on their battle uniforms and fully equip themselves with weapons. Tigr Vormud hoped that Mascias and the Silver Dragon soldiers would make it through the battle safely. Mascias entrusted Limelisha with keeping an eye on Tigr Vormud so that he would not take unnecessary risks. Bertrand also reminded Gerard to carry as many arrows as possible. The Silver Dragon army's main force, which had initially pretended to retreat, was now fully armed. They immediately joined the troops on both the right and left flanks. In the center, the two war maidens stood against the dragons, creating a formation that turned the conflict into an all-out battle. Tigr Vormund ordered his forces to use stone-throwing weapons, and the tactic proved effective in knocking down several enemy soldiers. After that, he launched a barrage of arrows from above, targeting the opposing forces. Rurik, Mashas, and the other Silver Dragon soldiers then raised their swords and advanced against the enemy troops who were attempting to withdraw from the battlefield. Meanwhile, Eleonora drove Arafar into the fire dragon. When the dragon unleashed a stream of flames, she swiftly moved toward the front of the two-headed dragon, causing the attack to strike its fellow creature instead. Ludmila advanced and attacked the fire dragon from both below and above. Moments later, the fire dragon collapsed. Eleonora then attempted to attack the two-headed dragon, but the impact of the clash sent her back to the ground. Ludmila tried to hold back the dragon's heads, only to realize how incredibly resilient the creature was. Eleonora then shared Arafar's power with Ludmila, and together they returned to the same strategy. They leaped into the air, with Ludmila summoning a storm of sharp ice shards. At the same time, Eleonora descended from above and struck the dragon's back with Arafar before unleashing Lay Admos. The combined attack overwhelmed the creature, and it soon fell after being struck from all directions. After defeating the dragons, Eleonora and Ludmila were completely exhausted. Even so, Eleonora believed that the battle was now firmly under their control. All that remained was to wait for Tigr Vormund and his forces to secure the final victory. After the battle, the girls relaxed in a warm spring near the hill. Limalicia asked whether Eleonora's back was doing all right. Eleonora said that she was fine because her injury had already received first aid treatment. Besides, Thenardir's forces had retreated, so there would probably be no fighting anytime soon. Thanks to that, they could finally get as much rest as possible. Suddenly, Eleonora started teasing Limalicia, commenting that Limalicia seemed more mature than before. Limalicia's face immediately turned red after hearing Eleonora's remark. Regine and Tita also agreed with Eleonora's observation. Curious about the change, Eleonora jokingly wanted to take a closer look, while Limalicia quickly tried to stop her. Ludmila could only shake her head at Eleonora's playful behavior. After finishing their soak, they went for a walk. Eleonora was tempted by the sight of large amounts of cheese being prepared nearby. Tita explained that cheese production was very common in Brünn, which was why the kingdom had so many different varieties of cheese. They eventually visited Tigr Vormund's tent and discovered that he had fallen asleep before even making it to his bed. Eleonora wanted to wake him up, but it seemed that ordinary methods would not work. Limalicia had once placed a sword in Tigr Vormund's mouth while he was sleeping, and Eleonora had done something similar before, though Tita had scolded her for it. Eleonora explained that Tigr Vormund had once told her that even if he fell asleep from exhaustion, he would immediately wake up if he sensed danger nearby. Tita pointed out that such instincts usually applied when Tigr Vormund was out hunting. Ludmila wondered what exactly Eleonora was planning to do. After handing her sword to Limalicia, Eleonora approached Tigr Vormund as if she were a potential threat. In an instant, Tigr Vormund woke up and reacted on pure instinct, pushing Eleonora onto the bed. The sudden reaction shocked everyone present. Eleonora simply smiled and greeted Tigr Vormund once he realized what had happened. The next morning, Tigr Vormund and the others gathered for breakfast. Eleonora explained that she had only intended to wake him by triggering his instincts. She apologized and promised that she would not do it again. The breakfast spread was unusually generous. It turned out that the nearest villages had donated a large amount of food to support them. Eleonora joked about whether it could be considered an offering made before anything else could happen to it. Ludmila then asked whether Tigr Vormund had simply accepted the supplies. Tigr Vormund explained that he had actually paid for them. More accurately, the villagers had sold the goods at very low prices. Gerard and Rurik had handled the negotiations. Eleonora asked whether they should take advantage of the situation and finish off Thenardir's forces. Tigr Vormund replied that their destination was Artesium, although Ludmila did not seem entirely convinced by that plan. Tigr Vormund explained that they would not enter the city directly. Instead, they would access the underground area from outside Artesium and obtain proof of Regine's noble heritage. Limalicia understood that if they could prove Princess Regine's royal bloodline, it would greatly strengthen her position. Eleonora added that doing so would place Thenardir in a very difficult situation. Tigr Vormund then asked Regine to explain the structure of Artesium's underground city. Regine admitted that she had only heard stories about it and had never personally been there. Beneath the holy temple of Priest Charles Grohl, there was an underground area of great historical importance. Charles was the founder of the kingdom, a man who had received a divine revelation to become king. The sacred temple was also regarded as the symbol of Brünn's beginning. Regine explained that she had heard there were 3 routes leading into the temple area. The first entrance was located in the center of Artesium. The second was connected to the Temple of Mashia, the temple of the goddess of harvest situated south of Artesium. The third entrance was located within the public cemetery north of the city. The route closest to their current position was the one connected to the Temple of Mashia. Tigr Vormud stated that he and Raykeen would head there as soon as possible. That night, Tigr Vormud entrusted command of the army to Rurik and Gerard. Not long afterward, Bertrand said that he wanted to accompany Tigr Vormud. Tigr Vormud asked whether yesterday's battle had not left Bertrand exhausted. Bertrand replied that he would be fine. He then mentioned that once the conflict was over, Tigr Vormud would be traveling to Jiktid. Bertrand admitted that he was getting old and wanted to remain by Tigr Vormud's side. He understood that his body was no longer as strong as it once had been, but he still wished to accompany Tigr Vormud whenever possible. Tigr Vormud agreed but warned him that if the situation became dangerous, he should retreat immediately. Bertrand laughed and went off to prepare. Eleonora remarked that besides having a princess to look after, they now also had an elderly companion joining the journey. She then stated that she wanted to accompany Tigr Vormud to Artesium as well, since her own future was also tied to the outcome of the mission. She even asked whether there was any reason she should not be allowed to go with him. Limalicia reminded Eleonora to remember her position and responsibilities. Ludmila added that a war maiden like Eleonora should be more mindful of the bigger picture. Eleonora replied that in a critical situation like this, it was important to understand what obstacles might stand in their way. She described it as facing the challenge together. Tigr Vormud responded that if the situation took a turn for the worse, his highest priority would be ensuring Eleonora's safety, followed by the safety of Princess Raykeen. That afternoon, they all headed together to the Temple of Mashias. It was a small temple that contained a passage leading underground. Together, they opened the hidden corridor and made their way inside. The temperature below ground felt noticeably cold, and Tigr Vormud remarked that it resembled an escape route. Raykeen explained that before Brünn was established, Artesium had been a fortress built to oversee and manage the surrounding region. Not long afterward, they came across a mural depicting a conflict between the gods and the dragons. In ancient mythology, dragons were said to be the only beings capable of challenging the gods. Eleonora added that the founders of Jiktid were believed to be incarnations of dragons. Raykeen explained that the gods and dragons had not been in constant conflict and had also pursued peaceful relations. According to legend, 3 towers of the gods had been built for the dragons. If they had already found that mural, then the sacred temple could not be far away. Suddenly, they encountered Felix Aaron and a group of Thenardir soldiers. Felix Aaron was surprised to discover that Raykeen, the Prince of Regnaz, was still alive. Raykeen was equally shocked and wondered why Felix Aaron was there and how much he knew. Felix Aaron stated that there was little point in explaining anything further. Eleonora and Tigr Vormud immediately asked Raykeen to step back, and Bertrand quickly escorted him away. Tigr Vormud released an arrow, but a Thenardir soldier easily deflected it. The two groups soon clashed, while Felix Aaron observed from a distance. He then ordered Steed to move forward. Eleonora instructed Rurik to hold back the opposing forces because she intended to face Felix Aaron herself. Eleonora rushed toward Felix Aaron and swung her sword. Felix Aaron swiftly met her attack, and the two exchanged blows for several moments. Eventually, Eleonora was forced backward by the sheer strength behind Felix Aaron's strikes. At the same time, Rurik worked tirelessly to hold off the Thenardir soldiers who continued to approach him. Just as he found himself in a difficult position, Tigr Vormud came to his aid by sending an arrow toward the advancing enemy. Steed then entered the battle. Rurik immediately greeted him with a sword strike, but Steed proved to be an exceptionally formidable opponent. Tigr Vormud fired another arrow, yet Steed successfully diverted it. Steed praised Tigr Vormud's remarkable skill. Even with allies obstructing the arrow's path, minimal lighting, a low ceiling, and opponents positioned at an advantage, Tigr Vormud had still managed to aim accurately at Steed's head. Steed was no longer surprised that Tigr Vormud's title of Silverash was well-deserved. Steed told the Silver Dragon soldiers standing in his way to move aside, explaining that his only targets were Raykeen and Tigr Vormud. Rurik responded that if they all stepped aside, they could no longer call themselves knights. Meanwhile, Felix Aaron complimented Eleonora for being able to match his strength despite not yet being 20 years old. Eleonora responded by questioning why someone of Felix Aaron's age was still spending time in such a place. Felix Aaron replied that this very location was the reason he could secure victory. Felix Aaron raised his sword once again, forcing Eleonora to lose her footing. The two resumed their intense duel, and Felix Aaron's strength proved impossible to underestimate, pushing Eleonora back repeatedly. Before long, the ceiling of the underground passage began to crumble. The soldiers grew alarmed as the structure started to give way. Eleonora quickly moved to a safer area. Felix Aaron ordered his men to withdraw immediately, but Steed continued advancing toward Eleonora. Tigr Vormud instructed Rurik to continue protecting Her Highness Raykeen. Bertrand urged Tigr Vormud to return at once. At that moment, Eleonora ran toward Tigr Vormud and immediately understood what he was planning to do next. Tigr Vormud then fired an arrow at Steed, but Steed easily deflected it. He immediately moved in to attack Tigr Vormud and declared that Tigr Vormud's life would end there. Seeing that Tigr Vormud was in danger, Eleonora quickly turned around. Bertrand rushed toward Tigr Vormud. Just as Steed swung his sword at him, Bertrand suddenly stepped in. Eleonora cried out in panic as she called Tigr Vormud's name. At that very moment, massive rocks began collapsing from the ceiling after the incident. A short while later, Tigr Vormud opened his eyes and saw Steed's lifeless body lying in front of him. Steed had been buried beneath the falling debris from the underground chamber's ceiling. Tigr Vormud immediately began searching for Bertrand. Not far away, he found Bertrand lying weakly on the ground and continued calling out to him. Bertrand was still able to respond, which brought Tigr Vormud a sense of relief. However, Bertrand had suffered a severe wound to his back from Steed's sword. The injury had occurred when Bertrand stepped in to protect Tigr Vormud from Steed's attack. Bertrand was happy to see that Tigr Vormud was safe. Tigr Vormud told him that he had survived because of Bertrand's help. He then held Bertrand's hand tightly. Feeling the warmth of Tigr Vormud's hand, Bertrand became even more certain that Tigr Vormud was unharmed. Bertrand admitted that he had already accepted the end of his journey. Tigr Vormud asked whether Bertrand would not be returning to Alsace as he had previously planned. Bertrand replied that spring would soon arrive and the plains of Alsace would surely become green once again. Tigr Vormud hoped that Bertrand could continue holding on. Suddenly, Bertrand called out Urza's name. He said that Urza's son had grown into an exceptional man who continued fighting to protect Alsace and preserve its peace. Bertrand confessed that he was proud of Tigr Vormud. For a moment, Bertrand remembered the days when Tigr Vormud was still a child. Ever since Urza had fallen, Bertrand felt that there had been little he could do. Because of that, he had often worried and wondered whether a 14-year-old Tigr Vormud could truly protect Alsace. Mashes had his own responsibilities and territory to manage. Yet all of Bertrand's concerns had ultimately proven unnecessary. Bertrand said that Tigr Vormud had surpassed every image of a great man he had ever imagined. He admitted that he felt deeply ashamed of his own doubts. Bertrand no longer believed he was worthy of taking Lord Urza's place as Tigr Vormud's guardian. Even while enduring great pain, Bertrand urged Tigr Vormud to remain focused on protecting Alsace. Because of Tigr Vormud's deep love for the land, he had always been able to see beyond immediate challenges and look toward the future. For that reason, Bertrand no longer felt any concern. Having served the honorable House of Vorn, he entrusted one final request to Tigr Vormud: to continue taking good care of Tita. After delivering those final words, Bertrand closed his eyes forever. After escaping safely, Eleonora, Raedkeen, and the others made their way toward the sacred temple. At that time, Eleonora was extremely worried about Tigr Vormud's condition. As they drew closer to the temple, a tremendous explosion suddenly echoed through the area, accompanied by a brilliant light rising into the sky. Raedkeen was shocked by the phenomenon. Eleonora, however, looked greatly relieved and immediately headed toward it. Riding through the crowd of people, they soon spotted Tigr Vormud lying on the ground. Eleonora rushed to his side. Clearly overwhelmed with concern, she immediately checked his condition. Tigr Vormud managed to open his eyes briefly, greet Eleonora, and acknowledge her presence before losing consciousness again. Relieved to see that Tigr Vormud was still alive, Eleonora suddenly noticed Bertrand's lifeless body nearby. Deeply saddened by the sight, she quickly called for her soldiers to prepare a stretcher. Eleonora and her troops then brought Tigr Vormud back to the camp. She explained to the others how Bertrand had risked his life to search for Tigr Vormud, and how everything had begun from that moment. It was only because of Bertrand's sacrifice that Tigr Vormud had been able to survive and remain standing until then. Everyone was saddened after hearing the story. At that moment, Gerard asked Mashes whether Felix Aaron would be able to recover in time for that night. Mashes replied that he honestly was not sure. Meanwhile, Tigr Vormud remained silent, still grieving the loss of Bertrand, the man who had always stood by his side. That day, Tigr Vormud was still grieving Bertrand's passing. Tita could only stay silent as she watched him sink into sorrow. Then a faint voice seemed to suggest that it would be a good thing if Tigr Vormud could finally master the power that had been entrusted to him, allowing him to control it on his own and easily break through the ruins that had trapped him. Earlier, Tigr Vormud had destroyed part of the ruins by firing an arrow into the ceiling. The loss of Bertrand weighed heavily on him, and he continued to call out Bertrand's name. Not long afterward, Eleonora came to see Tigr Vormud and asked what he intended to do next. Tigr Vormud requested that she ask him again the next day. However, Eleonora believed that if she waited until tomorrow, he would already have come up with many different answers. More precisely, they would not truly be his own answers, but conclusions shaped by the circumstances surrounding him at that moment. There was even a possibility that he might decide to stop the war altogether. According to Eleonora, Thénardier might be willing to offer a reasonable solution if they pursued negotiations. In addition, they could protect Alsace that way. Tigre Vormund asked about Eleonora's own goals. She replied that she would determine her path herself. She also mentioned that whatever decision they made would shape the road ahead of them. If she had to choose, she wanted to take part in a battle she could be proud of, one that would allow her to hold her head high. According to Eleonora, her pride as a knight would never leave her heart. In the past, she had been nothing more than an ordinary mercenary soldier. She did not even have a place she could call home. She wandered from one battlefield to another. Throughout those years, many of her companions lost their lives, and she possessed nothing of her own. Because of that, she always protected her true identity within her heart. Hearing her words reminded Tigre Vormund of something she had said before. If Eleonora had her pride, then he had the determination he inherited from his father and the people around him. A smile finally returned to Tigre Vormund's face as he realized what his own decision should be. He then approached Tita and apologized for making her worry. Tita burst into tears and embraced him. Tigre Vormund promised that once the war was over, he would take her back to Alsace so they could hold a proper funeral ceremony. Afterward, they would spend as much time as they wished talking about Bertrand and remembering him together. That night, Tigre Vormund and Eleonora sat beneath the sky and talked while looking at the stars. Tigre Vormund felt that Bertrand had been somewhat worried because he was able to see a world beyond Alsace so easily. Yet during the final moments of his life, Bertrand had appeared completely at peace. Eleonora remarked that perhaps someday Tigre Vormund would understand another reason why she had chosen to help him. It was not a matter of romance but something much more specific. Tigre Vormund could not understand exactly what she meant. Eleonora then asked why Tigre Vormund thought Moazanellon had attacked Brun's southern border and attempted to seize the coastal cities. Tigre Vormund guessed that it was because those cities were important trade centers. Eleonora replied that he was capable of seeing the direction in which the war was leading. At that moment, Tigre Vormund realized that if they could connect Alsace and Leitmeritz through the Vosges Mountains, many possibilities would open up. According to Eleonora, war was not merely a struggle for power. It could also create opportunities for new cultures and new ways of life to emerge. It could establish territories united by strong beliefs and shared purpose. Alsace would undoubtedly change as well. If someone worthy of leadership guided that development properly, positive things could happen. Unexpectedly, their friends had been watching Tigre Vormund and Eleonora's conversation the entire time. Tigre Vormund was surprised and wondered how long they had been standing there. As usual, Gerard and Rurik immediately started blaming each other. Ludmila explained that everyone had been waiting for Tigre Vormund. Hearing that, he sincerely thanked all of his friends. The next day, Pierre arrived at Tigre Vormund's camp. He felt relieved to see that Régine was safe. Tigre Vormund greeted Pierre politely, and Pierre mentioned that they had met before during Urza's funeral. Machias then asked what business had brought Pierre there. Pierre revealed that His Majesty, the King of Brun, had begun to regain consciousness, and it appeared that he had been poisoned by Maximilien Benusa. Everyone who heard the news was shocked. Pierre then asked Tigre Vormund what his goal was and what he planned to do next. Tigre Vormund answered that they would return to the battlefield, confront Thénardier's forces once again, and remove him from power. Pierre followed up by asking what Tigre Vormund intended to do regarding Brun. Tigre Vormund explained that his only wish was to ensure the peace of Alsace. After that, he planned to return to Jicted as a prisoner. Eleonora immediately protested, saying that Tigre Vormund should find a much better title than prisoner. Ludmila, on the other hand, said that she would gladly welcome him as an honored guest. Hearing that, Eleonora scolded Ludmila. Pierre then asked once more whether Tigre Vormund was truly doing all of this for Alsace. Tigre Vormund confirmed that he was. As long as Alsace remained peaceful, nothing else mattered to him. He even stated that he would not object if Alsace eventually became part of Jicted, provided its people could live in peace. Afterward, Machias asked Pierre what he wanted. Pierre admitted that he hoped Régine could be taken to Nice as soon as possible because His Majesty the King might not have much time left. Régine was stunned upon hearing those words. Tigre Vormund was convinced that Felix Aaron and the forces accompanying Thénardier would try to stop them. He declared that the coming confrontation would be their final battle. On that day, the Silver Dragon Army and Thénardier's forces marched toward Merville. The two armies soon clashed beneath the pouring rain. Machias told Roland not to worry because the knights had already secured the enemy's right flank, while Rurik and the Jicted forces were attacking from the left. Régine admitted that she simply did not feel worthy of holding such a commanding position and believed that Tigre Vormund seemed far more suitable for the role. Maximilien Benusa emphasized that the purpose of the battle was to ensure Régine could safely enter the capital, which was precisely why she had to take command. According to Lime Elisha, the Silver Dragon Army appeared to have the advantage. Mashes pointed out that Thénardier's commands seemed somewhat careless. At first, he had suspected it was a trap, but it appeared that the reports about the enemy commander being at the sacred cave were actually true. La Militia noted that Thénardier's forces still had Felix Aaron, and he should have been the one directing his subordinates. However, Felix Aaron was absent at the time, which explained the outcome of the battle. Régine began to wonder if Felix Aaron's true target was Tigre Vormud. As it turned out, Tigre Vormud was indeed moving toward Felix Aaron, while Eleonora and Ludmila remained on standby behind him. Felix Aaron stated that if he had returned to the capital, he surely could have won the war. He could have set traps, bought time, organized the troops, and devised effective strategies. However, he acknowledged that it was already too late. Tigre Vormud then asked why Felix Aaron had attacked Alsace. Felix Aaron explained that if he could gain control of Alsace, he would be able to reduce the threat posed by Jictid, even if doing so meant bringing devastation to Alsace and its people. In reality, Tigre Vormud had sought assistance from Jictid first. If Tigre Vormud had not done so, Maximilian Benusa of Ganelon likely would have, since he seemed to have ties with Jictid as well. Tigre Vormud admitted that he could never forgive Felix Aaron. At the same time, Felix Aaron could not forgive Tigre Vormud for killing his son Zion. The two men prepared for their final confrontation. Felix Aaron gripped his massive sword, while Tigre Vormud readied his bow. As Tigre Vormud drew the bowstring, memories of Bertrand's death resurfaced, reopening the deep wound left in his heart. Along with those memories came a faint whisper encouraging him to use power however he wished. His eyes burned with intense resentment. The moment Eleanor noticed it, she struck Tigre Vormud across the face, causing his arrow to fall to the ground. She reminded him that seeking justice was one thing, but allowing darkness to take control was another. She warned him not to let those feelings become the source of his strength. Tigre Vormud looked up at the sky, which was beginning to clear. In the distance, he thought he could hear Bertrand's voice calling out to him. A relieved smile appeared on his face. Only then did Eleonora fully realize that Felix Aaron's actions had been driven by the grief he felt over the loss of his son. Tigre Vormud prepared himself to bring the battle to an end. Eleonora and Ludmila could do nothing but watch. Tigre Vormud picked up a single arrow and threw the rest aside. Seeing this, Felix Aaron questioned whether Tigre Vormud truly intended to face him with only one arrow. Tigre Vormud replied that he would not need a second chance. He drew his bow once more and declared that everything would yield before his determination. Hearing those words, Felix Aaron calmly accepted the challenge and waited for the attack. Felix Aaron immediately charged forward while Tigre Vormud maintained his stance with the bow. As Felix Aaron continued closing the distance, he remarked that Tigre Vormud had lost his senses. Moments later, Tigre Vormud released the arrow. Felix Aaron prepared to deflect it with his greatsword, but he was too late. Before he could complete the motion, the arrow had already struck his forehead. Felix Aaron collapsed to the ground. The soldiers watching the duel were astonished by Tigre Vormud's incredible skill with a bow. Racked with pain, Felix Aaron could not understand how it had happened. After reflecting on the moment, he realized that a sudden gust of wind had prevented his sword from intercepting the arrow in time. Tigre Vormud slowly approached the fallen man, who could no longer continue fighting. Eleonora suspected that the wind might have been Arefar's doing, but that was not the case. Ludmila explained that Tigre Vormud had won through his own strength. He had fought with such resolve that even the wind seemed to stand at his side. And so, Tigre Vormud's war, which had begun with the conflict in the lands of Dinant and continued through countless battles, finally came to an end. News of Tigre Vormud defeating Felix Aaron with a single arrow eventually reached Maximilian Benusa. In Maximilian Benusa's view, Tigre Vormud still needed to continue refining his abilities. Not long afterward, Valentina came to see Maximilian Benusa. She reminded him that a celebration was being held that day and encouraged him to leave right away. On that same day, Tigre Vormud escorted Régine back to Nice Palace. The citizens enthusiastically cheered as they arrived. Régine greeted the people with a warm smile, while Tigre Vormud appeared noticeably embarrassed by his appearance. Régine thought the look suited him very well. Tigre Vormud became even more self-conscious, especially after his hair, which had been carefully styled, returned to its usual shape. Régine simply smiled and remarked that he looked handsome. Tigre Vormud admitted that he felt a little strange because he was not used to dressing that way. Tita seemed somewhat downhearted after seeing how close Tigre Vormud and Régine had become. Meanwhile, Eleonora, Ludmila, La Militia, and Mashes were also accompanying them. Eleonora believed that she should have been the one sitting beside Tigre Vormud, while Ludmila felt exactly the same way. As usual, the two of them found themselves competing over matters involving Tigre Vormud. La Militia could only let out a deep sigh as she watched their behavior. The citizens responded with a thunderous round of applause for all of them. Afterward, Tigre Vormud and the others were escorted by Pierre to the royal chamber. Pierre informed them that the messenger from Jicted had already arrived. Regine was deeply shocked when she saw her father's condition. The King of Brune had already heard everything from Pierre. He apologized to Regine for having overlooked such an important matter as king. He admitted that he had placed too much responsibility on her shoulders. The king then asked what Tigre Vormud desired. Tigre Vormud presented 4 requests. Essentially, they served as a declaration of victory. One of those requests stated that the territory of Agnes, which had been neglected after the battle against Muozanellen, would officially become part of Jicted. The document was signed by Regine, further demonstrating to Hughes that Princess Regine had already shown the qualities of Brune's future ruler. As a gesture of gratitude from the King of Brune, Tigre Vormud was awarded the title of Moon Knight Lumiere. Hearing this news left Pierre astonished. Tigre Vormud and his companions were delighted, while Eleonora even wanted to celebrate the occasion on a much larger scale. Several days later, the King of Brune peacefully passed away. From that point on, the people of Alsace lived in peace. One day, Tita was busy with her duties while the little dragon Luni continuously sought her attention. Before long, Rurik and the others asked about Tigre Vormud's whereabouts. Tita suggested that he was probably out hunting, since spring had already arrived. Meanwhile, Eleanor asked Limalisha about the progress of the transportation route through the Vosges Mountains. Limalisha explained that workers from Brune had already begun arriving and were preparing to start their tasks. They were simply waiting for the snow to melt. Eleonora acknowledged that Regine was truly considerate for keeping her promise. Limalisha reminded her that Alsace was under the shared authority of both Eleonora and Regine. She also pointed out that the agreement had not been established through an official arrangement between their nations, but rather through a personal understanding between Eleonora and Regine. Eleonora understood and chose to view it as Regine's own initiative. Ludmila returned to her position and realized that everyone had come to acknowledge Tigre Vormud's achievements. On that day, Pierre noticed Regine spending time alone. He was still thinking about the Lumiere title that the King of Brune had granted to Tigre Vormud. Whoever received that title would become a candidate to inherit the throne in the future.